There you are. Please rise to the pledge. Mike McNamara will lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's a day to have a sponsorship deal with this meeting. It's 7-11. First normal meeting or regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ballston Spa. So minutes are not going to be approved for the last meeting due to some issues in the office with a little sickness, illness. Everybody is fine though, so we will move right along. We'll do multiple minutes at the next meeting. So we'll move right over to mayor announcements. Got several. I'll try to make it quick though. We talked about street signs and the repair or replacement of street signs in prior meetings. We have assembled with DPW's help and Jennifer Moskowitz, our village administrator, a list of 91 urgent or semi-urgent need street sign replacements. That includes some that need varying lengths of street poles to get them where either they were damaged or just missing entirely. The total cost of those 91 signs, which is really 182 because they're double-sided, was about $14,800. So as you remember, the county suggested they might be willing to help us out with some of that. I talked to County Administrator Steve Bolter on Friday, and he is working to get us actually, I said to him, I'm giving you the full amount. We're not asking for the full amount necessarily. He said he's going to attempt to get us the entire $14,800 to replace all the 91 urgent and semi-urgent need street signs. So we appreciate that work. It's not final, but it is at least a step in the right direction to get us a host benefit contract for that amount. So thanks to the county for that.
Mayor, can I ask just a clarifying question? By street sign, do you mean name of street or other sign?
It is name of street. And that's, for the county, that's a big thing for safety issues, first responders, et cetera. And that was the appeal we made and probably made the most sense to utilize it in that manner, because obviously the first responders finding streets, if they don't have GPS for some reason, it is important. Speaking of the county, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of compilation of county economic news we got, I think today, in fact, in our emails. The first 5 months of this year, compared year over year to, let's say, 2021 especially, showed some really favorable numbers overall. Tourism rebounded with record revenue per room. That's after COVID and all. So if you went before COVID and went to now, it's still a record. 16% sales tax jump compared to 2021 is being seen in the first 5 months. Unemployment is down 1.6% to, I believe, 2.8% for the county. Also, one interesting note, though, closed county real estate sales dipped compared to 2021. I think what happened there was things got very heated in 2021 early on, have leveled off since that point. So we're still strong, but just a little bit of a level off there. So we've been seeing some definite positive signs, and obviously the sales tax number is something we all pay attention to very much to know how we're going to do when it comes to sales tax revenues that the village gets. The Brownfield Opportunity Grant, I was informed Friday that our contract submission appears to be complete and is being sent to the proper authorities at the state for execution to over, I think it was about $130,000 grant that the village has received, at least the authorization to go to the next step of the process in. And it will take about 2 months for execution, according to the email I received. So that process continues. It's a state scenario, a little bit slower than you might want to see, but it gives us some time to get ready for our next steps as well. Unfortunately, we were rejected as a village for the TAP CMAQ grant. I got some good news, bad news situation here. Bad news is obviously the rejection. This would have funded changes, especially for High Boulevard, sidewalks, street changes, etc. It would have required us to do some immediate code changes. So for sidewalks, we had talked about that before, that we can't really give grant money out for sidewalks with the current code. So while that should still be changed, it's not the same immediate need that if we got this grant, we would have had to run out and change that code real quick. It would have cost us about $250,000 as a match. yeah, I guess to me, the good news is that the county received TAP CMAQ money. And I think ours was geared to, in some ways, make High Boulevard some connection as Zim Smith Trail connection to Saratoga idea that's been floated around. The county had actually filed for the same reasons, to connect the Zim Smith Trail to Saratoga. They received their money, or at least the commitment for it, and they will continue to do so. Currently, their plan is to use Oak Street to Malta Avenue on the east side of the railroad tracks as the connection to get the Zim Smith Trail to Saratoga. It's not final. That was what their feasibility study seemed to recommend. And right now, that's the track they're going on, but they promised to keep us in the loop about what is next with respect to that. To go to High Boulevard would have caused some zigzagging. This is not a cheap project as it is. I think it's about $8 million to connect Oak Street to Saratoga in the way that's happening. So you can see that if they had to zigzag it, it would just increase the cost probably unnecessarily. But again, nothing's final in that. They are definitely still working hard to figure out the exact things to do now that they have the money authorization. Carla and I had a meeting with the town of Milton, specifically Scott Ostrander, the supervisor, and Jim Craig, their town attorney. First, we talked about the water provision issues that I brought up here about town of Milton residents outside the boundaries of the village. Ultimately, we've talked about the need for either agreements or water districts in the town of Milton, or the users with the village of Ballston Spa agreements there. And we explain what the need is, what's been done wrong in the past, why we need to rectify these situations. And I would call it a productive conversation. We're working to ensure, especially, that water can be provided to the Iron Springs development, that is that Roland Street extension that leads to the new Iron Springs development there. And also, I probably get at least one, maybe two requests a week for people seeing that extension, that they want to tap into the water off that extension as well. So we are working hard to ensure we can get those customers online, but it does require more paperwork than has been done in the past. We'll just leave it at that, or at least more formalization of what needs to happen. And the town was amenable to working with this, and we're going to continue to do so. Hopefully have some updates over the next couple of weeks on how we're going to resolve that. So anybody that is out there asking for water, we are getting to you. We do want you as customers. We spoke also about Woods Hollow. Remember last meeting we discussed giving me some authorization, informally at least, to continue that conversation about perhaps turning over Woods Hollow to the town. It is located in the town of Milton, away from the village of Ballston Spa, and seems to be serving the town more than the village at this point, especially now that it's not a water reservoir for us any longer. We had some back and forth about some ideas. I know Paul Farnan had brought up the logging question, that there's revenue to be made from logging that site. And that's one thing that definitely was looked at as something we need to value for going forward. Also, an appraisal is going to be needed for the property too. So we were starting to set the boundaries on who needs to do what to move this forward at all before any offers get made and any formalization starts to occur, and for boards to be basically more deeply involved in the process. So we have a lot of diligence we're continuing to do, and we will continue to do it to see if it makes sense financially and viably to make that sale or takeover, whatever you want to call it, ultimately. Wednesday, this week, we have a discussion with the Ballston Spa Central School District. Ed Martin, the facilities coordinator, and I are going to kind of bring everybody up to snuff on conversations that he and I have had about safety issues on streets surrounding Malta Avenue School, especially High Boulevard and the surrounding streets. We had shared some ideas in our discussions in the past, some of which came from the pedestrian bicycle master plan, others that have come from Ed and his side of the ledger. And we wanted to talk especially to the residents in that area to see their ideas, their concerns, to hear what they view as good ideas, ideas they don't want to see there, et cetera, as we move forward, because the Ballston Spa Central School District is willing to work with us here to come up with ideas and possibly some financial options on how to correct the issues that do exist safety-wise, especially around High Boulevard that we spotted over the last few years. Ray Otten, we need your help on this one for a second. Kelly Park Playground event on Saturday, July 16th at 8 a.m. It's, I believe, the Lions, the Rotary, and community have all kind of gathered together to get this playground together. Take it over. Go ahead. You're going to do it.
Along with a lot of private citizens and businesses in the area. It's all coming together. DA Collins came in last week and poured all the cement piers for us. Thank you, Mark Fleck, wherever you are there, for being my cement mason, because they called me and said, we're scheduled for tomorrow, but we can come today at 1:30. And it was like, oh. So I called Mark up, he jumped to the task and came down with his own tools and everything else. We got those all set. And thank you to DA Collins and Wendy Stone for that. It was all donated. And everything is ready. I put messages out to every civic group that I know of. If I haven't hit anybody in this room, please, Saturday, come on down, Saturday morning, 8 o'clock, down in Kelly Park. We're going to have free coffee and donuts. And I got kids coming, I got grown-ups coming, so there's going to be a whole bunch of people working. So hopefully we can get it done in about 8 minutes. I mean, instructions said 2 people, 5 hours. So I figure if I get 50 people, that's 10 minutes. Right?
I think that's the law of diminishing returns or something like that they try to teach me about in school. I don't know how it
We're
works.
excited. By next week, everything should be in place. And the memorial stone was also donated finally. We found it out on the Armour Farm out on Top City Road. And we're just trying to figure out how to get it from there to here. So that will be all done.
8 a.m. Saturday, either be square or be next to the pier or something.
Bring your tools, right to the barrels.
Also wanted to include, Jeff had informed me before the meeting that you see some activity going on in Saratoga Avenue. They've had some cave-in problems on the pavement there. They're working hard. Evolution, who's our contractor with use of the paving services, et cetera, has been working hard with us to identify what is going wrong underneath the ground, essentially, because locating the utilities that are under there has been a challenge. Not everything is where it's supposed to be, or there might be more than what we assumed was under there. For instance, there's one case where there is, I believe, a sewer pipe on top of a sewer pipe scenario, and that's a great way to have a cave-in occur. So they are continuing their work, and again, Evolution is not necessarily a blame, but at the same time, they're helping out because they understand that something's just wrong over there, and they want to make sure it's resolved. So thank you to everybody, the DPW and Evolution, for working hard on that Saratoga Avenue issue. Going back to the Kelly Park scenario for a second, somebody asked me about what the piers were, where the playground was going exactly, because I was at Kelly Park Thursday as the first mystery reader. And apparently I did okay on reading the book to the children 18 months to 5 years old. Book Finding Kindness was one I chose, especially in this day and age right now. We need a lot more of it. For those that don't know, the Ballston Public Library is doing that event on Thursdays starting at 10 a.m. Activities, songs, in addition to the mystery reader program are going on there. And so if you have any children, come on along. A lot of fun out there, and I even got a hug from a young man out there, so I appreciated that. They do appreciate seeing, hearing these books and having a good time in the summertime, that's for sure. That's all I got. Time for liaison reports. Let's go right to left, because I always do it the other way around. We'll start with Bernadette. It's pretty easy. Sean.
Nothing really new to report, other than the fact that, yes, we are in the time when we need to bag and bundle all your debris. So, and PDW usually goes through every Friday to pick it up. So if you're wondering why they haven't picked it up, probably because it's not Friday.
So the Friends of the Wiswall met last week and started talking about all the different needs of Wiswall and challenges, and so they have some minutes they sent out, and they welcome additional people. Hopefully we're getting that going. Anyone who wants to participate can join and contribute. Their next meeting is tomorrow at 5 at Wiswall, but you're worried about the weather.
Oh, yeah, the weather, and then I saw that the
library has a meeting here at 6:30, and we won't be done at 6:30. We usually allow to stay until 7, so I have to work that out in the library. And I do have lots of information with me tonight, so whenever I can talk, please let me know.
Nobody met the last 2 weeks.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait a minute.
The senior center received a grant, a COVID relief grant, $15,000. So I don't know that they finalized how they're going to use that, but it'll be put to good use. For the senior.
A number of Ballston Spot community not-for-profits received a share of, I think it was $2 million from the county, and great job by them distributing that money. And I know it's going to be very helpful to these organizations. So great to hear you bring that up, Ben, right there, because it wasn't just them; it was a lot of people that benefited from that. Okay, Treasurer, it's your report.
Okay, so at the last board meeting, following the news about the USDA intent to award letter for financing of the DPW equipment and approval of the grant. One of the steps that we have to do in the next few days, weeks, it's time crunching. It's a contract with an auditor because the amount of funding we received has signaled a mandate for a single audit. That federal amount is $750. As we talked about, we have $1.1 million in USDA loans with $136,000 no match grant. So that's obviously making the requirement for a single audit necessary. I did reach out to Teal Becker, who was here last board meeting to give us a presentation on our fiscal year 2021 audit to see if they would give us a proposal. And unfortunately, they turned down that offer, seeing that the fact that we don't know when we're going to get the USDA money, because that's dependent on the closing of the loan. They didn't want to contract with the village for that unknown timeframe. That to be said, with the USDA loan, it could happen during this fiscal year or next fiscal year. So I'm currently in the works and looking for an auditor for municipalities for the same audit. Related to the audit presentation from last meeting, I'm asking for input on the type of audit the village is looking to receive for the fiscal year that just ended in May. The audit that we received from Teal Becker was an audit called Agreed Upon Procedures. It verifies the procedures that the village conducts and that they are compliant with generally accepted accounting principles requirements. If the board is content with this audit report, I can begin soliciting for proposals moving forward. I will note that many companies I was referred to several years ago to provide this service are no longer in the municipal accounting business. That being said, the price that we paid for this last audit is more than likely going to be increased at least 1.5 times to 2.5 times the amount that we paid this time. And the ability to find this firm will be a little bit more difficult. Last that I will say is that we have passed the final date to turn in property taxes in meter cards before the deadline. We are obviously still accepting both of these, although penalties will be applied as necessary. Once the fees are applied, I will be calculating the water bills probably this week. And these bills will go out and be delivered on or around August 1st. And that's it.
Can I ask the audit types? I mean, we have a choice between 2 types.
There's quite a few out there. The most familiar ones are the agreed upon procedures, which is what we had this time. And if you go through a full blown financial, which requires that financial statement that was mentioned during the audit presentation, that could cost $35,000 and up. And you would need the financial statement, which would cost more money to get that financial statement created.
Because who creates?
Good luck, Liz, on this.
Oh, do we create the statement? I thought.
We do an AUD, which is the comptroller
Right.
requirement, but a financial statement which states any opinions or comments about each difference or increase or decrease, or if there was a prior year adjustment, that's what the financial statement would mention. And it's like Nate had mentioned at the audit presentation, it's about a 60-70 page financial statement. And generally CPAs and municipal accountants do that.
Do we know what other municipalities do?
I did not reach out. I know that was mentioned. I just haven't had the chance to get
I'd
to
like
research
to
around the
know
area.
what sort of standard procedure, for the municipalities particularly.
I can do that. Thank you.
So, just so that I'm clear, where the threshold that triggered the audit is $750,000.
For the single audit, yep, for federal assistance.
And that audit could cost up to $35,000.
No, that's different than the audit that the board has elected to do for just our normal end of year AUD audits. But this is something that we are mandated, especially now that we have this USDA loan pending, this contract that we have to create.
And because of that, we may push it to the next fiscal year.
Yeah, just because when we get the USDA funding, that happens at closing, which means we have to receive all the equipment prior to closing on that loan. And since equipment's delayed just due to manufacturer delays, it could be this fiscal year if we're lucky, or it could be next fiscal year. So that single audit could happen June of next year or June of 2025.
Okay, so theoretically, if we went for less than 750,000 and took the rest out of our own funds, we would be able to purchase equipment, much equipment, correct?
No, this has no impact on when we can order it. It's just a mandate that we have to follow, seeing that we got to order that federal assistance.
Okay, so we can order the equipment without having the loan? Is that what you're saying, or?
We have the intent letter right now. What our next steps is, contracting for bond counsel, which we have, are in the process where we already have done, and then we need a contract for an auditor to do the single audit.
We have a pretty good firm I heard lined up, possibly bond counsel, not naming names.
No, my only concern is time. That's-
No matter what we do, unfortunately, we are stuck in a supply chain disaster right now, and we are doing what we can, working with Jeff to make sure that when we have the opportunity to lock in and get a better date sense, we're doing it with these letters, which may not be Carla's favorite thing in the world that we're doing right now, but at the same time, it's getting us some certainty moving down here in the line. And that's got nothing to do with the loan, it's just the sense of the world right now.
If we had done the gap audit, would we still need the single audit?
Yes, yep, because it's based off of the federal assistance, which is the loan. And if we had a grant that the village was approved for that was over that 750, that would also signal it. So this ARPA funds that we received, we did only receive about 566,000 between the two payments. If that was over 750, we'd have to have a single audit for that as well. So it's just a state mandate.
Here's a boatload of money, but spend some to get it. That's basically what you're telling us in that case.
Yeah, the single audit could range anywhere between 10 to 20,000, just depending on the market right now, especially because no one's doing it. But
We get
just-
130 something in a grant.
Yeah, 136,000.
So that's kind of worth it.
Yeah.
I think so. Okay, our presentation tonight, I got to thank our planning board for basically going through a process here of reviewing the PDD legislation proposal. They are mandated in our code to do so, and took that very seriously, held a meeting last month, sent the village board their, I guess, vote in findings related to it. But Roy O'Connor is going to give us a little bit of an assessment analysis of what the planning board did here and the ideas they arrived at along the way. And I will turn the floor over to him and to Mike McNamara to a certain degree, I think, who's a member of our planning board. Roy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take a few moments to give you a little bit of background on this before I go into the presentation itself. We're doing this primarily because the board had requested specifics in our report, and the methodology with which we had to go through legally to make that report to the board didn't indicate anywhere where specifics could be included. So the mayor felt it would be important for us to come before you, the public and the board of trustees, to go through what we did in this particular meeting and the result of the public hearing that was held in conjunction with this meeting on June 22nd. So with that, I'll dive into the presentation. Can I have the next slide, please? Hope you can all see this, and Zoomers out there, I hope you can read it. The planning board responds to the draft legislation of the Village Code Modification 20774-B proposed a village-wide plan development district. This particular piece of legislation, folks, has been in process since probably early January or late December of last year. It's gone through a variety of different edits in the process. The document that was presented to us was discussed with the public. It was discussed amongst the planning board at length. And on June 30th, or excuse me, on June 22nd, the planning board was polled and voted 5-0 against recommending the draft legislation. It was a unanimous vote on 6/30/22. The planning board submitted per the village law, which is what the mayor just mentioned, our summary findings to the village board of trustees. The purpose of the presentation that follows is to supplement that decision and to document and give you more information about the report. Slide, please, Jen. The presentation has a variety of objectives. First of all, transparency, clarity, addressing the concerns of the public, and discussing options that are available to us as taxpayers and the village board of trustees moving forward. A little bit of transparency first and foremost. The planning board is comprised of skilled and experienced people. We're professionals who understand both the desire to maintain the village quality of environment and life, and then the necessity of controlled growth. The members of the planning board are appointed. We're not elected. We're appointed based upon our backgrounds and our skill sets. And each person on that board has a very specific set of skills. You'll be hearing from Mike McNamara in a little while, who's been in the planning business for over 30 years. The other members of the board have served on planning boards in other towns. And we also have a citizen on the board who is here tonight, Pete Martin. And Pete has been a resident of the village for almost ever. And he's got his hand on the pulse of the village and the taxpayers. So I think the planning board is well suited to deal with this type of legislation. And we did our very best to do that. We're also charged with another thing, and that's being objective. In matters of development, we have a very strong record of supporting the ideal of objectivity. We understand and we respect its values and responsibility towards the village, and most importantly, folks, you're the taxpayer. Next slide, please. Our future rests in attracting quality development or developers to increase our tax base. We're a limited village. We have X amount of area, X amount of space to grow. If we do not allow the quality development to take place in our village, the tax burden on our residents will continue to increase with the increasing needs that the village faces over the future. Frank mentioned the water district, the water tower. There are some major infrastructure issues that have to be dealt with a limited tax base. Development enables the village to maintain a lower tax amidst declining costs. And that will enable us to improve and sustain our overall prosperity without raising costs to the taxpayers of our village. Next, please. We're also very concerned and have discussed with council that blurring the line between legislative process, the village board of trustees, and process boards, the planning board, in government creates risk and liability potential for our municipality. Liability potential means lawyers. And all kidding aside here, lawyers are expensive. Okay, so if we can do anything to avoid that potential danger, the planning board feels it's very important to recognize it as a potential. Legislative boards involved in the process can be perceived as interference by applicants and developers. Legislative bodies make laws. They're not supposed to be involved in process. And if they are, it creates risk to the developer. Developers, in case you don't understand, put forth a tremendous amount of their own money on the hope that their investment, their project, will generate a return on investment for them and the community in which they invest. If they're caught up in any kind of process with the legislative branch, other than the final approval, which the legislative branch has, in this case, the Village Board of Trustees has the ultimate decision at the end of any type of planned unit development district or the planned unit development to vote yay or nay on it. During the process of going through presenting a development to a village or a town or a city, there is communication constantly between the boards, the legislative body, the public. Everybody is involved by a developer. Why do you think that is? Any idea? Because if they don't talk to all of the people involved and get their opinions, they're not going to get the quality of legislation put together to present to these people to get voted on and passed. They lose a lot of money. And that's essentially what development is about, investing money to get a return on it for everybody. Next, please. The public meeting was fascinating. We had about 25 to 30 people who showed up at the planning board meeting. It was held at the VFW. These were some of the questions we were asked as the planning board. And these are direct quotes. Why are we here? Do we need this? How do we stop this? We have no adequate zoning. What is a PDD? Encompassing the entire village is a mistake. It compromises the historic and R1 neighborhoods. This will discourage development and force developers away from our village. The planning board worked very hard in this meeting to answer these questions. It was difficult because there aren't real good answers to them unless they come from the legislative end, which is where the legislation came from. Why are we here? Was asked by a longtime village resident and first responder. His thought was, everything seems to be fine the way it is. Why would we change it? Do we need this? Was a question asked by more than a couple of folks because they didn't understand why we would need it in the first place. Another gentleman felt very strongly that this was really a bad idea and how could we stop it? We have no adequate zoning was stated by a former member of the Board of Trustees. And I agree with her. We don't have adequate zoning, but we also don't have any massive growth or ugly buildings that have been built in the last 50 years that have been done as a result of the zoning we have. Is our zoning questionable? Does it need some work? Yes, it does. But we could do that together, okay, without passing an overriding piece of legislation that puts us at significant risk of driving development out of our village when we need it more than any other time. Initially, this document represented a legislative body that would cover only the central business district. We don't have the zoning map here, but you can look it up online. And when you look it up, you'll see the central business district is relatively a concise area. The decision to go with the entire village came recently and made the entire village subject to a planned development district. This legislation would cover all of it. If you read the legislation, which is online, you'll understand that that could impact the historic district rather significantly. It could impact our R1 districts. It could impact pretty much everywhere. And the reality of it is none of the impact would be positive. In terms of forcing development away, this was spoken by a developer who has a major project in this village. It was iterated by two other developers that I spoke with that simply said, look, we've got people interested in our project, but when they saw this particular draft piece of legislation, they immediately backed away from what they were discussing that they wanted to do with us because they saw the risk of being able to move it forward in a productive and profitable manner. We did get a letter from a lady who said she was for the PDD, and we got several letters from other developers who just wanted to comment on it. Next slide, please. I would argue that we have to answer these questions for the public before moving forward on this measure. Board of Trustees. The people of the village are most directly affected by this legislation and deserve the clarity, particularly where requested. The taxpayers cared enough to come to this meeting and ask a lot of questions and wanted to be part of the conversation. But the reality is they haven't been, they don't understand why this is being presented. And it was our job to try to explain it. And it was very difficult to do. We did our best. Next. It is the sincere hope of this planning board and most of the public that the Board of Trustees, no, sorry, I just wanted to do this. The Board of Trustees will reconsider this legislation. We sincerely believe that there are options, real options, that we could come up with to work together towards a compromise that would protect the taxpayers of our village, give the Board of Trustees their confidence in terms of their perception of something horrible happening from some terrible developer, and allow the village to move forward and develop while keeping our taxes low. With that, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Michael McNamara, who will tell you a little bit about himself and address the specifics that the board so interestingly and justifiably asked for as a result of our meeting. Michael?
Good evening. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike McNamara. I've been on the planning board for about 3 years now. In 2021, I was on the zoning ordinance review committee. I am recently retired as a professional engineer.
Yeah, Mike, a little bit louder just because the
Sorry.
pen is going there.
So I worked for over 30 years in the land development business as an engineer. I was also the town engineer at various times for Charlton, Galway, Providence. I've actually helped to write and put together plans for dozens of PDDs for several different developers in multiple towns. Next slide. So my part of this process is going to be to get a little bit more specific. The village board did ask us to be specific. Our initial report, since we didn't positively recommend it, was a little bit more big picture, but we didn't want to ignore that request to give you some specific information. As Rory went and summarized, we did get a lot of public comment. Most of that did not favor it. And, you know, I don't want anyone to think that we were just negative against the PDD. The PDD is a great tool. It can be valuable both for the community and for the developer. So I think maybe some changes can be made to this, and that's what I'm going to try to get to tonight. So before I do, just to get some momentum, the previous general comments of both the planning board and the public input at our meeting, I think they can be put into two categories, basically. The first one is the PDD does not identify the perceived threat to the village. I think we see that in some of the comments like, why are we here? Do we need to do this? And how do we stop? I think that's really what that boils down to. Is what's the threat? The second big concern is that it's a mandatory PDD for projects that exceed the threshold. And what it does is it basically takes away the use of the underlying zoning for those applicants. And you know, our contention is that's going to discourage applicants for the very properties that we need someone to come in and develop the most. And we all know what those are. There were, as Rory mentioned, there were 3 village developers, and they provided public comments. I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that their opinion is any more important than anyone else, but these are the people that were asking to risk their own money and come in, and they pointed out a lot of these same concerns. And I think that's important. Next slide. So the first point, the PDD in its legislation, it doesn't identify what the perceived threat is to the village. You know, I've lived here over 50 years, all on McLean Street. And in that time, you know, I remember the village when there was a Western Auto and an IGA, and there was Beater's department store, and there were a lot of shuttered storefronts. And in my lifetime, there's been a real renaissance. You know, without mentioning specifics because I could never name them all. You know, we now have a lot of really nice restaurants. There's things to do in the village with very unique stores. And from what I can see, those store owners have really embraced the 150-year-old buildings that they're in. They've made the brick walls and the not level, you know, creaking floors part of the charm. And I think we've all benefited from that. I think the development that has happened in the village, and it's usually it's renovation, and I think it's been done responsibly. And that's not by accident. That's not just good spirited developers. It's also boards that are doing their job. I want to talk for a second on the existing zoning. You know, clunky, existing zoning, well, clunky, and that's my word. Really, that's on the applicants and the boards. It's not zoning that leaves the village exposed to some kind of pell-mell crazy development, and that's why you haven't seen it. So I do think the zoning needs to be updated, but you know, I don't think that there's any real threat. Next slide, please. So the second major concern was that a mandatory PDD for projects exceeding the threshold is going to discourage applicants. PDDs are normally an option for an applicant. They have the existing zoning. They can choose to do something with their property under that existing zoning. A PDD is far more costly and time consuming than just getting an approval through site plan. Why would a developer choose that if it's an option? Well, because PDDs usually recognize that sometimes you may have a project with multiple uses. You may need greater density. You may need more relief from setbacks. And that's really the benefit of a PDD, is to write zoning for that particular project. And usually there's something in exchange. The developer will provide some kind of public benefit. So there's a give and a take. Again, I'm not anti-PDD at all. I think they're great, but I think this combination of a mandatory PDD that you have to go through is really the problem. You're eliminating conventional zoning, and there's no appeals process either. So, you know, as a developer, developers want certainty. You know, they don't want mystery as to whether or not they're going to get an approval. You know, frankly, they take enough risk with the economy. Is the economy going to be in recession when my project is done? They don't want any risk at all in the approval process. They want clarity. And I think the combination, like I said, of the fact that it's mandatory, there's no appeals process, and there's no backup of existing zoning, the developers I know will laser focus into those points. They'll see it right away. And frankly, they won't even consider buying properties. I really believe that to be true based on my experience. Next slide. So now on to some of the specifics. In the intent, purpose, and applicability section, although it's represented as temporary, there is no stated sunset other than completion of a new comprehensive plan and revision of the zoning ordinance if necessary. You know, frankly, that's just an open-ended thing. I mean, if we were diligently working on both of those, it would take probably years. And, you know, the fact that we're saying if necessary with the zoning ordinance, it really does kind of make this a perpetual thing. A PDD should be a tool that you use in your zoning. It shouldn't become your zoning. And that's effectively what this will be for projects that meet that size threshold. It will become the zoning. You know, I think some of that uncertainty could be mitigated. You could add termination dates to it unless it were extended by the board. Maybe assurance that applicants that propose projects that do comply with the existing zoning, maybe maintain their by right status, you know, rather than having to take a chance that they'll get a PDD approval. Next slide. Also in the intent, purpose, and applicability, there was an exemption for renovations that would be on the internal part of the building. I don't think that makes sense. I think if we're going to have someone that's going to renovate a building, we want them to improve the outside too. We have a really good example of that now. Someone is before the board with the bowling alley. They're going to not only renovate the inside, but they're going to make it look better on the outside. The way it's written, that would trigger a PDD once they go and they try to do something outside the building. And to that same point, you know, do we want them to repave their parking lots? Sure, we want them to do some site improvements. So I think the way it's written, it's not really an exemption at all, because it's just not realistic someone's going to only work on the interior of the building. Another thing I think that should be done in this section is it should clarify, what happens with projects that don't meet those thresholds. Obviously, I think the existing zoning is going to carry, but it should state that. It doesn't. Next slide. PDD process overview. So paragraph B in the process overview correctly points out that PDDs are a change in zoning, and because they are, it's a discretionary act of the village board. That's true for all PDDs. Again, it's this combination of making it mandatory for projects over a certain size that's going to be a problem with developers. I think I've said enough on that before. Next slide. Under PDD specific procedure, this would be an opportunity to maybe add some kind of an appeals process in here if it is rejected by the village board. I don't know what that would look like. One possibility that you see a lot of times with board folks is if something is less than a super majority, perhaps they could continue on the process to the next step. And if they received approvals through the next steps, that their project would be deemed approved if it wasn't denied by a supermajority. But certainly there's a lot of things that can be done. Quick entry into the process again, if they make revisions to their plan, don't make them pay all the fees and everything and start over. Allow them to come back to the process with some changes. Next slide. Also in PDD specific procedure, these are kind of minor things, but on page 8, paragraph 3A, provide public access to waters when feasible is the way it's written. I don't think we want that. I think it makes more sense to say when practical. The bowling alley, again, used as an example, has access to the water. It's a concrete wall 10 feet wide. I mean, it's certainly feasible to provide public access, but do we really want to? This is something that would remain in the village board's control as part of the PDD, but it makes more sense for it to be practical than feasible. Another little minor one, I would add a provision that would give the village board, again, this board, the right during step 2 to waive the stated height restrictions. We have the former county infirmary as a project where higher buildings is probably going to be necessary to do something good there. And I've always envisioned that as kind of a Wesley type thing, like is in Saratoga. Why limit your board to not being able to have larger buildings? Again, it's something you can judge the appropriate of it on a case-by-case basis. Just a little technical thing. There's several clock-related things in the legislation. So I think in that same section under PDD specific procedure, I think you need to require that the planning board has to formally make a determination when that application is complete. Next slide. Expiration. This is toward the end of it. The way it's written now, a PDD will expire if the applicant hasn't completed 20% of construction. A lot of PDDs have sunsets, but normally they're based on whether or not the project is started. I mean, again, this is an enormous amount of risk. 20%, you could have close to $1 million into it and then be told you don't have any approval anymore. It doesn't make sense. It'll leave you with unfinished projects. It makes much more sense to base it on whether or not the project is started. And again, don't limit yourself to 2 extensions. If the economy is soft, maybe somebody needs a couple of years. Let's not throw away a project because the legislation says we can only give 2 extensions. Allow yourself the opportunity to extend it as much as necessary. So I think that's it. Rory wanted it back.
Thank you, Michael. I just would like to take this moment to thank the Board of Trustees for allowing us the time to make this presentation. We do have copies of the presentation that will be available to the public, both online and if you want to pick one up afterwards. Thank you, sir. These will be on the table in the back. I want to thank you all very much for listening. If there are any questions or the like, we certainly would entertain them. The agenda is full here tonight. I'll leave it to the mayor as to whether he wants to leave that for public comment or not. But beyond that, again, thank you all very, very much.
I just want to say, regardless of how you feel about the topic, I think hearing that level of specificity gives you a good feeling, or has to give you somewhat of a good feeling, that we have true professionals in our boards, like our planning and our zoning board. That was a level that I've never really seen, and I'll always be told how involved I am in development, et cetera, throughout boards in the region. And that was really top notch. I don't care how you came out, if it was 5-0-4 against or whatever. That was really, really impressive level of time you folks spent on this. And I know that's not the first time you had to go through it. So thank you for your commitment to the village. That's first and foremost. I'll let the board decide if they want to ask anything or state anything at this point. It's up to you.
Well, yeah, I'd like to say something. I just want to say I truly appreciate specificity.
Tough word.
Those specifics.
I truly appreciate you guys going through the extra effort to do that. That was what I was hoping for, and I truly appreciate that.
Glad we made you happy.
I am happy because that at least gives us a way forward.
That's what I'm looking. That's what we're all looking for.
So I do appreciate that. So,
If there are further questions, can we reach out to you guys?
Anytime you want.
Phone?
I'm easy to find.
Copy that.
but I did have a statement I also wanted to read. I'll try to be brief as possible. I just wanted to provide a historical fact that the current zoning and code procedure used coincides with a drought in commercial development, with only a couple of exceptions. And I believe that's why former Mayor Woolbright was the first one to propose a PDD, and was generally accepted as a good idea by the current planning board, because there was a consensus that current zoning severely limited development opportunities. The purpose of this PDD legislation was to give the planning board and the developers greater flexibility with projects that fall outside current zoning parameters, while ensuring village character is preserved. Without this, developers will be confined to existing zoning parameters and will have to go through the laborious appeal process to obtain a zoning variance to build something outside of those parameters, because the planning board only has the authority to follow zoning legislation as written, not interpret or modify. And to address some specific comments by planning boards from the minutes of the meeting. Chairman O'Connor, based on prior correspondence regarding Spencer Tacey's development plans, the current zoning code does not allow him to build what he is proposing, the proposed PDD McDuts. The current cost of construction has been the primary factor in the lack of development recently. Mr. Tacey stated as much in a previous meeting. Overall, based on what I've seen regarding highway access permits in my job submitted to the state and the region, this holds true. Most economists would state that it will take years for prices to return to prior levels. New comprehensive zoning legislation will likely already be in place, which could look very similar to the proposed PDD. Member Battenfield, the original PDD as written is essentially a wide open. It would mean determining specific parameters as we go along. So therefore has the potential to open the village and its board members to litigation. If a developer decides they have recently addressed requests by the planning board and the village board decides not to approve, I will not support that type of legislation. Member Martin, your statement regarding tax increases due to a lack of commercial development in Ballston Spa does not agree with the historical data. Since there has been almost no new commercial development in Ballston Spa in the last 50 years, without what you would categorize as skyrocketing taxes, based on historical data, other tax increases Other tax increases were small to moderate, other than 1 year during the remodel administration. And that was more a function of tax reductions and the lack of moderate tax increases in prior years than a lack of development. Member Burlingame, the PDD process has been known to take 6 to 12 months, even with the most wide open PDD. And could take longer if it was met unfavorably by the public. And Member McNamara, I believe that you had mentioned the mandatory PDD. I believe that making the PDD optional and not mandatory would be a good option. I would think reducing size restriction would also be beneficial. That way, a developer fearing that they may not get a zoning variance approved for their development as proposed would have another option. And that's all I have.
On that basis, I think, we looked at the comments. We didn't see the specificity until tonight. And
Yeah.
thank you for providing that. It actually did, give us some specificity, but none that addressed the building standards. So there was nothing in there that bothered you as far as what we were saying about building siding, proportion, scale, facades, entrances, signage, sidewalks, all the things that were put in here to make sure that a project that went under this PDD, would maintain the character of the village. So that's one point. But
Can you let him, I think he
well,
wants
I'm
to
still,
address
I'm
point by,
still talking.
well, point by point might be the best way to do it, because that's one point you said.
Yeah, it's very simple, Liz. The reason that we left that all out there is because everything that is in there regarding citing and all of the other things that you iterated are responsibilities of the planning board that are dealt with by the planning board in every application. So they're duplicitous.
Well, they're not in our current. That would be true if it was in our current zoning, but it's not. So that's the issue, is our current zoning doesn't cover those issues. And if it doesn't, that leaves the possibility for a developer to say to the planning board, you may want that, but it's not in writing. So that was the point of that. I'd like to say that we will, I believe, the best compromise position, and we compromised a lot on this legislation as we've gone down through the months, is that we could make it optional. That would take your part.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. please do
I'm
not-
sorry.
It's,
I'm gonna continue.
no,
No,
excuse
you're not
me.
allowed to interrupt.
Okay.
Trustee.
Folks, everybody,
I'm still talking.
okay, and I'm holding the gavel, so I'm gonna tell who's going the next here. We're gonna let Liz finish,
Okay.
and then we'll go to Bernadette, and you'll be after that. Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that we make this PDD optional. It takes away any of the barriers to anybody coming in under current zoning. They can come in if they have a project that does not fit current zoning, and I think there will be projects that don't fit current zoning. They can move forward with this, and I think that is something we will also, make any project that comes in on the PDD be required to meet all the current historic district standards if they're in the historic district. We feel those historic district standards were well developed and they should be preserved. And that anything that happens in residential zones be compatible both aesthetically and operationally with the residential neighborhood. The only other thing really that I'd like to add back is the neighborhood meeting in the beginning, because you said yourself, what was important was the public's input. So if somebody elects to do a PDD, there needs to be early feedback from the neighbors, and that the developer should inform folks, within, I think, 500 feet, and those people should be able to address what's proposed early on, so that both the developer and the village sees if there's issues with that project. And those are my suggestions. And I'd like to, provide, those edits to the PDD and have Carla review them for their, language that we need to write about language. So that's,
Brenda?
So, Larry Wilbright's name keeps getting brought up that, he wanted a PDD, and yeah, he did, but what was offered initially was so far different than what's been proposed currently. It's like comparing apples and oranges. So it is, I think, a little bit, I don't want to use the word dishonest, but not clear and not very clear to the public what is currently being presented. You say that a lot of compromise has been made, but I offered a ton of recommendations, some of which you did include a few of them, minimal. And then there were some recommendations that were finally accepted when our attorney recommended them. So I think you guys are unwilling to really look at what we have here is so excessive, so micromanaging. I am concerned. I am truly concerned that I appreciate the making it optional. I agree with you. And I thank you guys. This was tremendously helpful here with detailed explanation. But really, I think there's a lot more compromising that needs to happen for this to make sense for our community. No one wants crazy development. I don't. I grew up here. I want to see it thrive like it's been thriving with our small businesses, something that's going to make sense for everybody. But the level of just all these concerns, all of it's got to look like this, got to look like that. And I think that most developers, in essence, always try to work in with what's aesthetically pleasing to community, and our planning boards often will weigh in on that, and they do weigh in on that. I'm stuttering, excuse me, guys. I think it's that important. I'm getting a little excited, but I think we really need to go back to the drawing board. I don't think your minimal concessions are enough. I really don't.
I think it's a huge thing to make this.
Good enough, and
Sorry, I think it's a huge compromise to make this optional. I think it continues the pattern of compromise that this PDD embodies. I personally don't like PDDs. I think it gives too much control to the developer. I'd rather not have a PDD at all. And the fact that we are even talking within the context of a PDD is a compromise in my mind. And it comes straight from wanting to compromise with Larry and Rory and others who wanted the PDD for me. I was not interested in that, but I'm willing to compromise around that. The effort to put some specifics in there was done intentionally to try to, for me anyway, to mitigate the wide open nature of a PDD and the power it gives a developer in theory. And so to me, this is like I said, a compromise that is a PDD. It actually increases flexibility, it increases building size limitation. And by making a number of planning board members said, let's just use current zoning. Well, now that would be perfectly feasible. That would be an option, and let the market decide. If the developer wants to use current zoning, go right ahead. If you find the PDD is more conducive to development, you're welcome to use that, and you might, because it allows additional flexibility beyond what our zoning does now. But it's a big concern to me to go that route without some specifics about village character and compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, things like that. So I'm still hopeful we can find a way to, and the whole purpose of this is to find a way to enable development, promote development, facilitate that, while protecting village character, because we do have unusually large pieces of property that are now open to development, larger than has been historically the standard. And it does expose the village potentially to inappropriate development in theory. It could. And so this was an attempt to, in addition to being compromised, to be a temporary bridge. And the idea was it would be temporary, and at the time that the comprehensive plan has been completed and the village board is working on zoning, at that point, we would choose to, and actually the word if needed was put in by legal. So that was something, you know, just to keep things, I guess, open. But the intention has always been that this is supposed, at least in my mind, again, a temporary measure to enable, that's not a moratorium, that enables development to happen at a large scale, but still protects village character, and that will be sunset if the village board wants to, at the end of it, with replacing it with other zone, you know, updated zoning as a whole. So that was my thinking in this process.
I can't see any reason why anyone would argue with this option, because if it just sits there and never gets used, so be it. If it provides a developer an opportunity to develop a project and meet all the requirements, they can go forward, so we're not stopping beyond.
Michael? You learn a lot when you take over in this job. And this has been an interesting 3 months, to say the least. You've learned about a lot of projects, and Ben, I know you're moaning and groaning over there, but
I'm sorry. Sorry, that was my throat.
you're gonna probably find something surprising, so stay tuned here. You realize the challenges of certain things that you didn't ever really see living here in this area for 44 years. The infirmary being one of them. Mike, you discussed briefly some of the challenges there that aren't addressed correctly in the current PUD. What you don't realize possibly, and that I've learned accidentally in this whole thing, is that the infirmary right now most likely reverted back to R1 zoning. That means the current use is not allowed. In February, Kurt?
Yeah.
So we have choices here. Let's say what Ben and Liz have suggested occurs. Here's the choice. We either force them to do R1 things, single family homes, maybe divide into lots to do it. Not sure how that would work. It's not really something a developer would find financially a great idea, most likely under the circumstances. Or use this optional PDD that's not really geared toward the ideas of that property has very special possibilities compared to what your normal R1 would be. But then you go down the street to an R1, a conventional R1, and you look at it and you say, well, if I join this lot and that lot, I can maybe put together something that'll give me a 15,000 square foot parcel or something that can carry the 15,000 square feet. And now I can actually opt into this PDD and do something that was never meant for R1. So we have it kind of all backward here right now. We expanded it into R1 willy-nilly, and we're not really catering to the 1 or 2 parcels that really R1 doesn't identify correctly. The county probably being the other set, I call it 1, it's not really 1, it's several parcels ultimately. And they are partially in the historic district. So we have a lot of mismatch going on here, and the reason why I don't think just making it optional serves us is because I don't think the PDD is written correctly for the parcels that need it most in our community right now. That being the infirmary most likely, and any county property that might get vacated down the line. We don't know. We have to maybe plan for that idea to be ready for that to happen, if it does. If it doesn't, well, what difference does it make? It's zoned that way. They're not going anywhere. It is what it is at that point. I'm not worried about Angelica necessarily with this, although I don't know what the height situation will be after this discussion. I don't know really how much it's needed or not needed. If it's optional at that point. or any other property that's eventually affected. I just think that the properties I know that are going to be most in play or most problematic for us are not being served by this PDD. So if we're going through this exercise, we might as well do it damn right instead of doing it in a way that's not going to be very useful to anybody at all in this community. And unfortunately, that's the position we're currently in. 2 months ago, I suggested we workshop this for this very problem, this very reason, and we didn't do it. At this point, I'm going to suggest to our board one more time before sending this back to the planning board, because it's going to have to go back there once we make these adjustments, that we workshop it and make sure we're doing it correctly and making sure those properties that I just highlighted are actually being considered correctly this go around. I'm not faulting you because some of these developments are recent. I get that. But you can see what problems you create when you get too specific in a PDD, because you don't always see really the forest for the trees of what can happen down the line. And that's what happened here.
Brian,
Yes.
what in the specifics would not be applicable to a development on the nursing home side? What?
Well, height was one, as Mike brought up.
There's a very strong feeling amongst a lot of residents that I've spoken to that they do not want high buildings in the village. And that's where we came up with that as a maximum, because the highest building in this village is the factory tower, which could conceivably, easily put 4 stories with modern development, but would not go over that. I mean, look at Route 9 in Malta. They go up 5 stories. The community there, hates that. They did not want to build a city, so keeping the height to how many feet, which, could accommodate 4 stories, I think is the general mood of this community, and we can test that. But I would not support, a 6-story, 7-story, building on the nursing home side.
What about the county?
The county either. I think those buildings are too large. I mean, 4 stories is high enough for this village.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That's
But
my
I
only.
just, I think again, like, we should talk about this and workshop this, the stuff we've been asking for from the very beginning. I say we get one on the books, let's just hash it out.
I think
Let's just hash it out, Liz. I
I
mean,
think we've hashed this out too
no,
much. We've
to
now,
your specifics.
we've
your
now made it
specifications.
One at a time.
optional. Let's put it back. If the height is the only issue, that you want to build skyscrapers on the nursing
No
home.
one's saying that. No one's saying that at all.
Well, how
So don't
about-
put words in the mayor's mouth or anybody that mentioned that.
Well,
That's it, please. Let's
so,
finish this strong here.
I know you're a developer, and developers
You
want.
keep bringing up that he's a developer, right now he's representing all
Excuse me,
residents.
you keep
Please
interrupting
stop.
me.
You keep bringing that up, so please
Yes,
just.
I can bring up
Okay,
whatever
folks,
I want.
folks.
Okay.
folks.
And I'm
Word.
saying,
Word.
I understand
Benny,
developers want to maximize their return. Going up is the way they maximize their return. Perfectly understandable. The
I don't think
question
anybody's
is,
saying 7
is that,
stories.
you're still interrupting. Is that what this community wants? Do they want high buildings? I don't believe so. Everything that we've seen, that I've seen in the years I've been here is 3 stories, probably 4, even that makes people uncomfortable.
But again, I just want to highlight, you keep putting words in people's mouth, 7 stories. Let's have a
It's what
workshop.
I've heard.
Let's have a workshop. I'd love to have a workshop on this.
I would just like to bring up the point that was actually a workshop done a while ago. It's called the Economic Development Plan. And the height that Liz is referring to was from that development plan, not specifically, but the general tone was they didn't want big, tall buildings.
So that's not the only thing I'm referring to. I
Yeah.
would love to talk about all the issues, all the points in there.
Okay, well, Here's what I'm gonna do after this meeting. I'm gonna propose a workshop via an email, and we'll see where it lands. We'll keep everybody updated on it. And again, it should take nothing away from Rory, Mike, Pete, Scott, and John in the job that your board did in giving us the specifics. As I think folks here said they weren't satisfied with just the report, because the report is what it was going to be. The specifics were very helpful, and we do appreciate that and all the work we've done. So thank you very much for all your time.
And I
help.
want to add, super appreciative of what you did and the specifics, and I do feel what you have specifically should be incorporated moving forward.
May I just say one thing?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I've listened to all of your comments, and the underlying fact here is that I think every one of the board is missing, is that no matter what the way of development is done, whether it's a PDD, okay, or whether we follow current zoning or some variation on the theme, the Board of Trustees has the ultimate control because you vote as to whether or not the PDD passes. So none of the rest of this is truly relevant because you have the power to vote it down.
It's fully
So-
discretionary is what you're saying.
It is.
Yes,
The
but-
board has the board has the right to say no to a developer. I've done a PDD from the trees to the finished product. I can tell you this is from the bottom of my heart, as honestly as I can be, the amount of interaction that took place between the developers, the city of Saratoga Springs, and the members of the commissioners of the city and the public took 14 months of negotiation, working with the planner. And at the end of the day, even when the planning board chairperson said that it was the worst project she had ever seen, Jessica Eggleston, love her, she still had a 3-2 vote in the planning board to send it to the Board of Commissioners, and they approved the project. At the end of the first phase, Jessica Eggleston stood up in front of her planning board when we came back for phase 2 approval and said she was absolutely wrong, that it was the most amazing project she'd ever seen. So, but may I finish, please? I'm not demeaning anything you've done. You guys have worked, paid people, done hours of effort on this. I respect that. But at the end of the day, you have the ultimate power. What are you worried about? Thank you.
If
Can
Rory,
we respond to your?
Rory, would have you preferred if more of what they wanted was written down? So in the beginning,
No, because it was my responsibility to do that and sell them on my ideas because if I do that properly, okay, I can maximize my investment and return and please the board or the administrative board at the same time. If I have to dot every T and cross every I based on a legislation like you folks have proposed, I'm stuck. I can't move forward because I'm not going to take the risk, Ben, if I may. I'm not going to risk $5 million of my money, all right, to try and meet all of the things that you have in there, only to find out that you decide that you don't like what I've done. I'd rather move along and keep talking to you and getting feedback and the like every other municipality does, and then let you vote. If you vote me down, my bad. Okay, I screwed up. I didn't sell you. I didn't create what you wanted. But if I do create what you want, I'm hoping that you'd support me. Simple as that. And I don't think there's a developer in the room that would disagree with me in that regard.
Now,
And there's a couple of them here.
Rory,
Let's not fully relitigate this, guys, but quickly now.
yeah. If you went through and, you know, we're going through a PDD and you reasonably addressed everything that was said, and then the board says no, you have all the opportunity to litigate against the board
Well, that's true.
to
too.
right.
Well, yeah,
To
but
be compensated
yeah,
for that
well,
$5 million.
The word, well, and I'll spend two and a half to three of that with lawyers to do that. Okay, I don't want to involve attorneys.
I don't want to involve.
So therefore, why would I? It's semantics, Sean. I understand where you're going, and I don't disagree that those things exist. What I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, the Board of Trustees, okay, or in Saratoga Springs, the Board of Commissioners had the final approval. There was no, There was no appeal to that. If we lost, we lost.
So my response to what you're saying is that would be a bad situation for a developer to go through the entire process and for the village to then deny that.
It would be, but it's
application.
possible.
So, but we want the developer to succeed. We
Yeah,
don't
well, so
want
does the
them,
developer.
we don't want them to fail. We want them to know, these are our expectations. Here they are, move forward. If you meet these expectations and they're in writing, there's no reason for you to think that we won't vote to support that. And we broke it down in a number of steps early on, so there's minimal cost and risk involved in the early stages. They can know if they're on the right track or not early on before a major investment. The model you're suggesting to me is the model I'd like to avoid. I'd like to avoid a developer spending millions of dollars only to be told no at the end. And this PDD is an attempt to avoid that situation.
But you're suggesting that you're not going to be able to provide guidance in the 1 year long process at any point that's going to say, yeah, about that, no, not really, change that. And he keeps coming back with the same thing. You're going to be able to say, well, we told you so, it's on the record.
And there's a buffer, Ben. The purpose, you serve on a planning board, so you understand exactly what I'm saying, okay? You've read our village code. The details that we have to go through on a site plan approval are pretty much iterated in the PDD. In fact, most of, not all of it is taken from that, the code. We have, the planning board's job is to be the buffer between the developer and the legislative body. The planning board's job is to take all the heat and make all of the decisions and ask all the questions. And that's where this thing is messed up. It's, you guys don't need to do that. You don't need to micromanage it because you've got the ultimate authority at the end and you got qualified boards that are appointed. Liz, I'm sorry, it's
I'm
true.
sorry, your logic just makes no sense to me.
Well, apparently it doesn't, and I respect that too. But I think
All
it makes sense.
about-
I'm not gonna ask,
It makes
I'm
no
not-
sense
I don't
that
wanna
you
go on
want to
this-
go all the way through this and go back and forth with the planning board, and the planning board has a bright idea on this one, and, oh, you should do that. And then in the end, you know, we say no, and you've wasted all that money instead of having some of the parameters that the village wants in writing.
Then that's
like
on you as a
zoning.
developer, Liz, really. It's, you are gonna be told upfront and early, yay or nay, this is really on track, or this is off track, or it's something in between. If it's something in between, it's more on the developer to make sure it gets out of the in-between and to the right side of it, or stop investing the money in it immediately. I mean, why would you do that as a developer? So
Well-
again, I'm gonna cut us here, Ben. I think at this point, it's a good idea to say, if we're gonna workshop, we might invite Rory to join us and Mike too, because I think that they can provide more specificity probably along those lines. We'll go through email to see if we can get that to happen. And again, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Whole business, anything that didn't get included?
No, thanks for that update on the signs.
Oh, no problem.
Very
Thank you, Steve Bolter, for doing legwork on that side of it too as well. Roosevelt Park discussion, I'm gonna leave this, and I want to entitle this The Past, the Present, and the Future, and I want everybody in this room to leave tonight on the same page. That's always a challenge, I know, but there's a couple of things I really love about this community. I mean, more than a couple, but a couple relevant to this. We have some very passionate people that have a lot of great ideas along the way. And we need to embrace that and promote that fact and do right by that. Now, having said that, we also have some really great pieces of our community that are gathering places that are important central things to us that are ours. And we have to be very, very careful sometimes in taking a step back and seeing the big picture on them. I want to take the Wiswall Park Pass discussion here just to say essentially, let's get this done with, this tear off the Band-Aid. There were things said in the last meeting with people that were not here that I think wanted an opportunity. I know one that didn't want to come because they were there that upset by what was said. And all I can say is, I'm sorry to that person that they went through that. That wasn't fair. Ray, I know that you were similarly kind of had a finger pointed at you. I wanted to offer you the opportunity. If you wanted to say anything with respect to what happened over the last couple of years at Wiswell Park.
I would love to. One of the things I was offered during the last meeting was that I myself and Pete Champagne had developed a huge amount of authority that I didn't even know we had, and I still don't understand that I had that. It was said that it was Pete and I that wanted the farmers market moved, and we were the ones responsible. That was said, okay?
I didn't say you were responsible. I said it was your idea.
Let's play it back, Liz. I watched it.
Let's let him say what he has to
Let
say.
me finish.
Okay.
Let's get it done with.
All right.
I want to be done with this.
What had happened, and this is sort of the Paul Harvey moment, now the rest of the story. What had happened was when we initially were looking at Wiswell Park to do something, Pete and I, who were representing the Rotary, said that because it's Wiswell Park and Mr. Wiswell was our first president for Rotary, that we thought it would be fitting to redo that park and do something with it to make it look better. So one of the things we said we would do is put up a pavilion and have the, and if anybody's seen the drawing, have the waterfall or the water spigot moved up to the corner, okay, by Front and Low Street, and have a pavilion there. We would label it in memory of Mr. Wiswall, okay, or whatever it would say by the Rotary. And then the water lines would have to come across the road. But we said that's going to have to wait until they repave. We're not going to dig up the road just to get the water line from wherever it comes out of one of the buildings on the north side of Front Street. We're going to have to run that under, okay? And we'll do that when it paves. In the meantime, I was also in touch with Dave Forbes, Jeff Doris, Jason Miller, and the building inspector who is
Bill Lewis, Dave LaFountain.
Dave LaFountain.
Dave LaFountain. Thank you. We had a meeting in the park, and because we talked about the dreaded
Bishop's Week.
Bishop's Week. It's gonna kill us all. So they, being the town of Milton, said for free, we will come down there, dig up whatever bushes you want, dig up whatever weeds you want. We'll take them out of here. We'll get rid of them. You don't have to worry about it. Then you can work on the park. Then you can redesign. We have a beautiful design that was done for free by a Rotary member's husband who designs parks. Okay, that's his job in life. And he came up with a nice idea. One of the things that was mentioned was, well, we want to make it look Victorian. I went to a local historian and said, what kind of park would go there? What's been the history of that park? And that person said, the history of this park is whatever is current was what was done. So if it was 1842, it was whatever was popular in 1842. If it was 1927, that's what went in there. So we said, well, what's popular now? No, it's got to be Victorian. And we want this huge pavilion where we can have weddings and bar mitzvahs and whatever else. Okay. We said, well, that's going to take a lot. So as you can see on the drawing, that sort of scaled down because the cost, I looked at the cost for those type of pavilions. And if you got an extra $30,000, $40,000, you can have one. We suggested from Rotary a small pavilion in the front, and then whatever you want in the back. And then we're going to be tables, I think a half dozen tables or so in the back, and a little playground for kids. Now, the rest of the story. As far as not having the farmer's market there, what we said was, while it's being done, you can't have the farmer's market there. So they're going to have to move for a year or whatever time it takes. And once they come back, we can ask the vendors, being it's going to be new grass, and we all know new grass can't take a lot of tramping on. Maybe they could get some sort of mats or something, because there are mats that are available you can put down on grass that'll help it survive better if you're going to be tramping on it with their heavy boxes and that kind of stuff. We can look into that. That was what was said for not having the farmer's market in Wiswall Park. We didn't say it couldn't come back. It was mainly when it was being worked on. You're not going to have all these things dug out and the dreaded weed go away and all that, and have somebody trying to set up farmer's market. Ain't gonna happen. So that was the rest of the story for the previous, okay? That fell through because funding, it was gonna be, oh, I can get a grant, or maybe we can get a grant. So we're gonna put everything on hold until we get this grant, because maybe we can get enough grant that somebody will come in for $30,000 and redo the park. Okay, Dave, never mind. Jason, never mind. It's not gonna be done. That's the rest of the story. And then it took on another iteration and went to wherever it is now. And I appreciate the Friends of Wiswall coming in. I think it's a very viable idea that can be done. I don't agree with everything coming out of there. I have funny looking leaves in my yard too, but I pull them. And I'd much rather have somebody go through them every other week, weed, and get it out of there.
It doesn't work like that. You might
No.
explain
And-
more
yeah.
about that.
And I get the whole
But not
picture.
at another time, but at another time, because there's
So-
other things.
That's my spiel on what actually happened in the old.
Mayor, I'd like to make a
Appreciate that
statement and for the record. I was appointed by Mayor Woolbright as Commissioner of Parks and Recreation in 2019. In August of that year, Rotary members, and Pete Champagne approached me because they wanted to revitalize Griswold Park and potentially have the Rotary donate items. They secured the volunteer services of a landscape architect. I suggested we add another member to the, as we called ourselves, the Wiswall Park Committee, similar to Friends of Wiswall. We added Stacy Simmons, who at the time was chair of the Park and Tree Board and chair of the SBPA, who supports the farmers market. At our first meeting, Pete stated that we wanted the farmers market relocated out of Wiswall Park permanently because of the damage that they did. At the time, I suggested that the farmers market remain in the park. The suggestion was not accepted. On Friday, February 7th, 2020, Ray Otten wrote an email to the committee, which in part stated, I spoke yesterday with Dave Bush from the SPD. After a long conversation, we felt closing the alleyway behind the park twice a week would be an issue. His thought from a safety aspect would be to move the market, wait for it, Stacy, Kelly Park. All the things we have previously talked about came up for him: parking, access, room to expand, include other events, restrooms, pavilions. I informed the Wiswall Committee that the plan had to be reviewed by both the Park and Tree Board before it could be brought before the Village Board for approval, because that was the process. The design was presented to the Park and Tree Board in March 17, 2020 by Ray Otten, who stated, I quote, "The project is for the redesign of Wiswall Park to make it more usable by the general public as a pocket park, not an events location." There was much discussion in the Park and Tree Board over the meetings about alternative locations for the market. Ray actually was going to talk to the fairground to see if we could move the farmers market we moved up here, Kelly Park, County Parking Lot, and the Brookside Museum. The project was put on hold month of 2020 due to COVID, where the architect couldn't get to his drawings. Park and Tree Board discussed the plans and planned on executing the first phase, which was to deal with the bishop's weed, using professionally administered chemicals and removal of shrubs that summer with the assistance from the local DPW and the volunteers at little or no cost to the village. Park and Tree Board referred the concept design to the Village Board on November 11, 2020, where the board requested local businesses and public be surveyed to get their opinion. The survey was developed, placed on the village website, the village Facebook page, and distributed via VSGPA membership in March of 2021. The plan was pretty well liked by those who responded, with 2 responses against moving farmers market and 1 strongly in favor. Stacy indicated that she would contact the farmers market committee to inform them about the project. The VSBPA board decided to relocate the market to Brookside Museum in the fall of 2020 because they had to plan way ahead. presented with the plan. The consensus was that this move would help Brookside and be near the summer concerts. In June 2021, the VSBPA report said, I quote, opening weekend was a success. People seem to have located us without an issue. In June of 2021, Ray Otten sent an email to the mayor and the board, CC, describing the proposed project. Fundraising for many of the improvements will be done by village residents, and much of the initial work will be done in cooperation with the town, DPW, so as to make the impact on village resources minimal. There has already been some interest in the project by folks offering donations. Grant funding may also help. Local civic schools, Rotary, Lions, Garden Club, others have already said they'd be willing to help with some of the labor needs. His last sentence was, Wiswall is a park that belongs to all of us, not one group, and should reflect that, not be considered a platform for any one association or club. This project was essentially started by Ray, and I agree that the park needed to redo it. I was just one of several individuals who were involved. I mistakenly, and I take blame for that, thought that others were keeping the farmers market committee informed, and they were not. I did not lie about the work plan for Wiswall Park, and I certainly did not know in February 2021 that no work would happen in the summer of 2021. In fact, I was still attempting to get phase 1 work done in fall of 2021. I believe that certain politically motivated parties circulated false information about my role amongst the farmers and the SBPA, which led to the farmers to file an ethics charge against me. I received a letter dated October 5th, 2021, shortly before the election and Mayor Woolbright's resignation. I recently received a copy of the VSBPA email report where the then VSBPA executive director met with the ethics board on October 13th, 2021, and was given information about me and stated that the board, I quote, if any of this was unsure, I quote, if any of this rises to the level of an ethics violation. The case was dismissed. I received an email on November 3rd, 2021, because it was determined that the allegations in the complaint do not fall under the jurisdiction of the village of Ballston Spa or Texas. I question why the ethics board started an investigation and conducted at least one interview before determining that they had jurisdiction or not. I also question the ethics board own behavior in providing the VSBPA executive director prejudicial information during that interview.
So, Liz, if I may, your statement there, I feel like I'm naked without a statement here tonight. Everybody else has one. It goes from A to C without involvement of B, which I think is the problem that a lot of people have, and that is actually plaguing the current state of affairs. I want to carry forward the discussion briefly and then revisit it for a second. Past is on hold for a second. The present is that the farmers market is back at Wiswall Park, thriving right now. And Bernadette and I both went 2 Saturdays ago to all the vendors that were there, and they were thrilled that to be back. Those that are returners and the ones that are new had heard enough stories of what had happened last year, and luckily they've taken the risk to come back to see that the current location is a good place to be. And we're thankful for that. We're thankful for the work the VSBPA has done to ensure that that has happened this year as well. And I know all the merchants along that street are thrilled to see them as well. Where the past and the future seem to be meeting each other right now is this authority issue ultimately, because I caught wind a couple of weeks ago that somebody had gone to the vendors at the Thursday farmers market and told them that the farmers market would have to be relocated, most likely if things were moving forward in the way that they believed they were. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name clubs, committees, etc. But the statement was made by somebody in a club that does not have any authority, is not a committee of the village of Ballston Spa. yet those words can hurt our community. It's well-meaning person, I'm sure, that wants to see the best happen for the park, but we have to understand right here, right now, a few things. Number one, we need to learn from our past, no matter what the reality of that past was. Number two, authority belongs only to this board with respect to what happens ultimately with Wiswall Park. Not even the Park and Tree Committee, it's ultimately this board that has to deal with it. And so where the past story falls off the rails a little bit, Liz, I will be honest with you, is that you take it from committees, bypass the board, and the board making any kind of decision about doing something that would close the park. I mean, if I ever did something like that, you would have called for my job and my head at the same time, probably. But that seems to be what happened here, because somehow it went to this next step where we actually moved them because we're saying it's going to happen, but the board itself never said diddly about it. And here we are again with somebody out there saying, okay, this may have to happen again. Now, I had a discussion with Liz today. She called me when she saw the agenda items, and she said, oh, you're right, Frank, it should never happen. We should never close Wiswall Park. It may have to be fixed, it has to be assessed and addressed, absolutely. But, and correct me if I'm wrong or mischaracterize what you said, we should never have to close Wiswall Park in this
No, I
situation.
didn't say that. I said if major work has to be done, it might be possible that we would have to close Wiswall Park for, there are sewer pipes, I don't know how many, and old foundations and stuff under there. And those need to be addressed, which is one more complication to trying to do anything with that park. And no, you can't promise that a park will never be closed. I don't think that's reasonable. You know, if it affects the farmers market, you know, it affects them. I mean, Ray said himself, that's a park for all of us, not just one association. I want the farmers market in Wiswall, but I could guarantee that they will never be asked to leave there, I think is not reasonable.
I would say to you that you're going to, as a manager of this village as much as me and the rest of the board, we need to do everything possible to make sure of that fact. People are telling me, hey, you've got to go tell the county not to move. And I've talked to Steve Bolter about it. I said, no matter what happens, we have to make sure that our businesses are taken care of in the process. So I'm practicing what I'm preaching here. We have to make sure that our businesses are cared for. That includes the farmers market and making sure they're there, because when Iron Roost on a Wednesday has a 35-minute wait,
So
I can only imagine what they have on a Saturday, and the fact that they'll go across the street, the folks that are waiting, and see the wares that are there and enjoy it, and vice versa. It's a symbiotic relationship. So we have to make sure, indeed, no matter what, if there's a way to keep that farmers market in there and keep some part of the park open during that time of year, we got to do
So
it.
you're gonna guarantee Iron Roost that you're not gonna close Front Street when you repave?
Well, one of the things that I did was when Jeff came to me earlier this month, I think it was earlier this month or late last month, and talked about Front Street, I said, okay, Jeff, have me talk to the merchants, to the folks, the residents on the street, to come up with a plan, because it's not just repaving that has to be done, but it'll involve sidewalks, it'll involve infrastructure, et cetera. I said, and I actually tried to get you in the conversation, Sean, but you didn't answer that day, but I think the general sense would be agreed to, that unless and until we go there, we aren't doing it. And so we'll patch it up for now, do what we got to do, but let's work on, especially when he's out of Saratoga Avenue Health, that he basically works for next year, talking to the merchants, talking to the neighbors, and making sure that if there's a plan to go forward with Front Street, it is a full articulated plan for everybody to know what's
I
coming.
agree, but you can't say that you're never gonna close a street or a park when you have significant repairs to be done to those.
Why is anybody suggesting a park could be closed or the farmer's market would need to be moved in the preliminary stages of a club right now? That doesn't make sense either.
Well, that's secondhand, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we all agree, we don't want to close the park any more than we have to. And actually, this came up with the Friends of Wiswall meeting last week. when they're concerned, oh, you closing one street, and some store owners were concerned, and what they said was, for example, is that early spring, sometime for May, hopefully by May, that would be a good time. If you have to close Front Street, you have to close the park, do it before the summer. And so I think all of us agree, we don't want to hurt our farmers markets, we don't want to hurt our businesses. Obviously, we have to take care of infrastructure, so we just have to figure out how to mitigate the damage that may be unavoidable to some extent, and possibly maybe early spring might be the time where maybe that would work. So I don't think there's a real argument here. I think we all have the same value.
And I agree that ultimately, like I said at the start of this, we need to leave the room on the same page, because I'm sick of hearing about this, to be honest with you, and there needs to be some certainty here. We talk about the PDD and developers need certainty. You know who needs certainty? Our residents, our business owners, and taxpayers other than those right now. Folks, I want to give opportunity for brief comments, to anybody in the crowd that wants to say anything to this issue. I know Judy, you probably want to go first, so I will give you,
Could I just finish, sorry to go back?
Judy, is that okay?
I have a
Sure.
question.
Go ahead.
Again, I started this off by saying that Pete and I had a wild amount of authority that I didn't know we had. Who was the authority that told the farmers market they had to move?
They were never told they had to move. They were told
They
about
did
the
it on their
plan.
own?
They agreed.
No, we were told.
You were told by? You can say a name. It's okay.
They told us at a meeting.
I
Thank you.
didn't tell you, where does it say
No, I
that I
did.
told you, we discussed it, we
You
set
did.
the plan.
So what's going to happen
No,
here?
we said we had to make-
What's going to happen here is we're going to agree to disagree on the past at this point,
Right.
okay? What's clear is, again, the past and the future are getting tied by a thread of authority issues ultimately, but we all need to basically walk away with the certainty issue instead of these authority issues. Judy, go ahead.
Okay, so this does breach or, address that. And I just want to read the mission of the Friends of Wiswell Park, and the past is the past. That's the statement, okay? The mission of the Friends of Wiswell Park is to develop a comprehensive plan to renovate Wiswell Park in the center of the business district of the village of Ballston Spa. The committee will be composed of area residents, business owners, and workers, and will report to the village of Ballston Spa Park and Tree Board, the mayor, and the board of trustees. The Friends of Wiswell Park will meet on a regular basis to develop an objective plan for renovation of the park in the center of the village, to have an area that will be a pleasant respite for people to socialize and for activities for the community. And then it goes on about some other things. And then I listed all the park, the uses of the park right now: farmers market, meeting places, films, obtaining water. And if you look at the park, when they're doing the films, they have to project this so high because the burning bush, which is an invasive plant, is blocking the view. They could have it lower. That's a problem. The leaves are toxic and they're overgrown. The bishop's weed is all over the place. There's absolutely no color. You can't put any color in it right now because of the bishop's weed. And yes, it will be used. It will continue to be used. I didn't say anything when I was talking to people around the village and doing a survey. We actually I didn't pursue it anymore, but I had 56 signatures, and most of the people were in favor of, not only renovating the park, but getting rid of the bishop's weed as a primary concern. As I looked at the drawing that was done, and this was another problem that someone brought up, that there wasn't a lot of space allocated for public activities. So at our last meeting, we had a great first meeting of the Friends of Wiswell. We decided to take out some of the flower beds and have as more space for vendors and activities. The business people, they want activities. They want to sponsor things. I'm not following my notes at all here. Okay, so as far as back to authority, We thought we could start with a couple of projects, like the benches need to be repainted. That can be done by volunteers. The pavilion, even if that gets replaced, it might still be 3 or 4 or 5 years. It looks horrendous. It needs paint, the roof is bad. Can we make those improvements? So as I said, we will work with the board to make those improvements. But do I have to, every time we want to do something like that with volunteer labor at no cost, do we as the committee need to bring it to the board?
So Judy, I'm gonna give you the same speech I give Mark Fleck all the time about the Arts Committee. Yes, yes, and yes. Unfortunately, welcome to municipal red tape for people that are used to private sector.
Because
This is a little strange to them, but it is the
because a
real.
couple of weeks ago, I was told that we didn't, so I questioned that. So that's why I wanted to bring it up here. I wanted it official.
So she goes first to the Park and Tree and then to this board.
Like Mark goes to the Arts Committee and the Arts Committee
That's
comes to
exactly
us.
the procedure that
Mhm.
I followed the first time.
And we can use email for communications.
But I think what needs to be clear, Carla, do you have a broader view here from the legal perspective, what can go off the rails in a situation like this and what to be careful of, I guess?
The loaded question.
I know it is. That's why you're here.
Well, I have to be honest, you folks have more committees, commissions, and boards than any other municipality I've ever seen. So I'm actually right now trying to find my list of, Terry had given me a list when I first started, and now I can't find it. The Park and Tree Commission from this, when I read in the code, reports to this board. There's nothing in that talks about or with any other committees or that they can form committees or anything like that. My guess is that's what's happened here. Somehow, at some point, the Park and Tree Committee board created a committee.
No.
So that's where
I am on the Park and Tree Board, and the Park and Tree Board, as we understand it, is advisory. We don't create things, we don't go to the board to ask for money. The Kelly Park play thing that's going in, was a recommendation from the Park and Tree Board, but we didn't bring it up. Ray and his, workers brought it up.
So I guess my concern is when a committee, any committee, says, we're gonna do X, and this board doesn't know about it, that's a concern.
Right.
Because this board is the one that's supposed to say, we're gonna do X.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is where you want me to go.
It's you are your own free will.
It could be dangerous, I don't know.
No,
You're pretty
that's why
talkative.
it's official, I want,
Well, but I don't know what you're looking for to be official.
like, for these benches, the benches will have to be removed and some volunteer take them to their house to paint.
So it's the same as Ray suggesting to this board that he wants to do a playground. That's a group of citizens,
Okay.
Rotary, that says, we're gonna raise some money, we think it needs to be done.
Okay,
We're not gonna charge the village anything, so what I think we need is some sort of procedure that we put out to folks that says, you want to do work on village property, this is how you do it.
well, I think you definitely need something in writing for all of your committees on that.
Right.
On a procedural basis and like an organizational chart, so to speak,
Yeah, well,
that needs to be created, just
Because
because
it's
that'll
not
help
clear
everybody.
to the members, and not even clear.
No, it's not, your code isn't clear.
No.
So I guess, are you asking this board right now today for permission to do this?
We are having a meeting tomorrow night. So that's one thing that we thought we could get maybe the benches and the pavilion looking a little bit better for, something to do, something to start with,
Well, let me say this, Judy, as a baseline issue, I think I can say for all of us here, we appreciate the attempt and notion of trying to make it a better place, 110%. The issue becomes that we make everybody go through the same process. Like I said, the Arts Committee, Park and Tree Board scenario where you go through them first. Ben's been a stickler on that. I know over the years here, or the year and a half, he's been on here, that, you know, it should follow the process unless there's an emergency or time crunch situation specifically. Even that sometimes isn't enough. Okay, so we've got that done. So would you be averse to going to the Park and Tree Board at their next meeting to get authorization that gets fed to us? We probably rubber stamp it, but that's what we have to do because it is village property. So the buck stops here, and that's the way we would handle these things. You'd be okay with that? Yeah. So I think we're good there.
Because everything else that's going to happen is gonna have to come through the board too. Any grants that we apply for.
Correct.
you know, volunteer
Through the
work.
Park and Tree Board usually, because again, the arts committees like that in terms of they would authorize the grant filing process. I think the thing I want to get to here though, ultimately is just this notion. Are we all on the same page that no guarantees, Liz, okay? That we're not closing Wiswall Park to the degree it can be avoided here, that nobody's going to be going and trying to act with authority here, that we're going to be doing it unless it gets stated by me with a vote or vice versa, or somebody from here with a vote that says yes to that. We are not going there or kicking out the farmer's market anytime unless the BSBPA tells us they don't want to be there anymore.
Well, as I explained here, I wanted to keep the farmer's market. The other people said, no, they didn't.
We said, let the past be the past now, let's look
Okay, I'm
forward.
saying, and as soon as I heard from one of the farmers that they were unhappy that their sales were down, I attempted to get them immediately back into Wiswall Park. And
Liz,
the rest of
Liz, I'm trying to help you here at this point.
Well, what
I'm
has
trying.
not helped, Frank, is the continual bringing up of farmers market by various individuals with the implication that it was all my idea.
I think at this point, I could say that we, as I said, tore off the Band-Aid here tonight. Let Ray speak, let you speak, move forward to look at what the future is to make sure we don't make this mistake again. Do we all feel, as I said, that we're going to do everything possible to avoid any closure or kicking out of the farmer's market going forward? Are we all on that page?
I just want to add one thing.
Go for it. Make it quick.
Okay, I'll make it quick as possible. So you can either, when you're rebuilding a bridge, you can do one lane at a time or close. The reason they close, because it's better, faster, and cheaper. Okay, so if you don't close something, it's slower, worse, and more expensive.
Hopefully we can confine it to, if we ever had to do it, confine it to March, April, so it doesn't affect the people that need it. That's the type of thing.
I think that would be the best course of action, to try to do it when it does
And
not.
may I say that most of the changes can be done in a short period of time. It would be unfortunate if a contractor let us down. You know, that would be the only thing.
In deference to timing, and folks, we'd ask you, please, we can hear you up here a little too much at this point. I'm gonna ask us to kick any further comments to public comment number one, because I want to talk about new business P briefly. This is not gonna take that long.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Oh, yeah.
My understanding of Friends of the Wiswall Park, similar to other Friends of Parks and Friends of other things, it's really just a citizen volunteer group. It's not appointed by the board. It's whoever wants to join.
And I'm trying to get representatives from like every club and every, you know, farmer's market. We need someone from farmer's
So
market.
it's not a volunteer-led thing.
We
This is
need
not.
someone from the arts committee to be on.
Let's let Carlos speak.
But that's what I thought it was. But then when it turned into, the mission statement that I just heard tonight was that they go to the Market Tree Board, and then they go to this, then all of a sudden it's cloaked with some kind of governmental authority. And that's where I'm confused as to whether they are an NFP, whether they are an unorganized association, it's late. Or if they are a committee of the village. That's where it's merged. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Well, they are if they report to the board. If they report to the board, they're a committee.
That's why I'm trying to say that we're not doing that.
Yeah, maybe the semantics. you know, that they present to the, any citizen who could present to the.
I just want to get to the bottom eventually.
I think like Schenectady and the park they have there has a Friends of the Park, and there are other friends of
Right.
places. And maybe we could research and see what the arrangement is in other places and if it's parallel to what we want to do.
I can tell you the Village of Schuylerville, Town of Saratoga, and Town of North Upperland. They have Friends of Schuyler Park. It's a not-for-profit organization. That's how they do it.
Well, there's friends of the library.
So,
Okay, new business B, village events, permits, overtime issues. We have to, this is another moment of being clear to the citizens here about the process, the way the process should be in certain cases, et cetera. Over the last few weeks, been a lot of back and forth and all around about village events, whether or not they should be held certain places, et cetera. And the general view of this board has been, at least behind the scenes, in discussions by email, that if somebody's going to fill out the permit form and do an event that is intended to benefit the community, we are signing off on it, not standing in the way of it. Great. We had a situation this weekend where we tripped onto a social media post about it. And there's a difference right now that I think is sort of missed by certain people about the sidewalk code that we just passed and the events code that exists, or amusements, I think amusement events or something like that. So I want to be clear about this for everybody. If you are doing something that is in pursuit or furtherance of your business in front of your store on the sidewalk, that is covered by the sidewalk code that was just local law number 1 of 2022, the Village of Ballston Spot. Once you go beyond that and go into things like more of an event style with music and acts and all kinds of different things that are not directly connected to the furtherance of your business, you are now in the amusement events category. And we are fine with that fact, as long as you're abiding by the general, make sure the sidewalk has passage areas, et cetera, but you have to file for a permit for that. So I think what we need to make sure of here, just to be clear, is that because you're using the sidewalk in front of your storefront, does not mean in and of itself you can avoid a permit related to the event you're doing ultimately. Now, we haven't finalized the stuff related to sidewalk dining and sales correctly yet, and we'll get to that, but let's assume that the code is there the way it is, because it is in there the way it should be right now. Events need a permit for the event on an individual basis. Sidewalk sales, restaurants, go look at local law number 1 that was just passed and it's been received by the state, et cetera, et cetera. One of the other murky things that's occurred, and Liz and I had this discussion earlier today after she'd seen this and was asking me why I was on there. My own sister is accusing me of basically singling her out with Mark with Family Fun Day, because I said to Julia, look, when it comes to overtime for DPW and police on weekends, we need to account for that, because technically that is something coming out of the coffers of the village. Doesn't mean we're not going to provide it. It just means that in the assessment of the event and the costs or what we're giving as a village, we need to take that into consideration and approve it. So moving forward, anybody that's got an event that's going to cause something other than the normal Monday through Friday hours of DPW, police, et cetera, you're going to have to account for your setup, your breakdown, and any other hours that are going to be in there that are going to cause an overtime situation by the village. Again, we are not saying no to it. We just have to account for it and approve it as a village board. I think we've had some false starts with respect to this in the past. Liz thinks, I think that Larry had tried to start it up at one point.
Larry had stated that he was going to account, for all the overtime, for, any events, because exactly as you said, we need to know what an event costs the village in total.
I don't think we quite got there, though. I don't think it ever got, let's say, procedure-wise behind the scenes. We are going to start doing it because we need to do it. From a legal basis, we need to do it. So again, we're not trying to stand in the way of events in any way, shape, or form here. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're doing everything correctly. Because look, I don't want somebody in 5 years chasing me saying, hey, you screwed it up. None of us do in that respect. So that's what we're gonna have to do moving forward. Don't be surprised if we ask for that backup moving forward, and we're working with the clerk to make sure that she'll have the set of questions to ask if it's apparent it's a weekend event, especially what we'll need to know to approve it ultimately. Go
Can
ahead.
we add it to the permit form, just those questions?
I haven't seen the permit form.
We can work on that, I'm sure.
I have it on my list. It's 21 of items.
Okay, well, it just makes sense to put it on the form. Do you require,
Hours.
DPW to, do whatever, or what do you require, if any, from DPW or from the police?
Okay, so aside from me looking like the bad guy here for the last two items, is there anything else new business wise or on that line? Okay, folks. We're going to public comment number 1, 3 minutes per speaker, as we did correctly get into the rules procedure last meeting. Lisa?
I don't need it.
No, it's there. I see it. Okay, whoever would like to come up and speak, raise your hand and we'll give you that 3-minute clock, and don't be shy. If you want to speak, now's your time for public comment number 1 on any topic. See Donna Dederos? Come on up, Donna, come on.
Actually, I'm not even sure if this is in order because it's a question about the mayor's announcements. Is that okay now? Yeah, Donna Darderas, 64 Middle Street. You mentioned the county economic report and what they reported in it. Did that report say anything about what it's costing the county to have to run a separate primary election this year?
It did not. This came from Todd, I always forget his last name, Chimpus, and it was basically, I think, the Chamber of Commerce's rundown and breakdown. So I wouldn't expect to find that in there. If I can find it, I will let you know.
Okay, because I suspect it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That we didn't need to spend if our legislature had gotten their act together. But that was all. I just wondered if you knew about that.
I did not. I'll tell you this, the interesting thing we learned when we were going through budget process and the whole changing election date was that the cost of our election, to run our own election, was $2,500, I think, give or take. So it was a little bit less than I thought it would be for the village, but still, it does take mobilization, it takes costs and everything else. So I don't think the dollars just tell the only part of the story when it comes to having to do that twice.
Actually, I think for the village election, it's not the outlay dollars that cost, it's the number of hours that the staff works on it, that they aren't working on regular village business.
Like I say, I think it goes beyond dollars and cents ultimately. Anybody else with comments? Yes.
Hi, Sandy Hasher, Boston Small Business and Professional Association. I just want to make a comment on not the past of Wiswell Park, the current use and what's always been our use as far as the BPA for the park. The park is located right in the center of the village. It's right in the heart of our village. We hold events there because the BPA focuses on what can we do for our businesses. What we do best is hold events. What better place is there to be right in the heart of the village to hold those events at Wiswell Park? We bring those events, draw people visitors from all over the capital region and beyond. I'm always asking people at the events, where are you from? The visitors that are already here, and they come from all over the place. And what do they say is, oh, wow, yeah, so we knew the village was here. We didn't know what the village was about. They ventured in while we were here to the events. They ventured into the shops, the businesses, the restaurants. And that's what we hope for. That's what we want. That's what we do, and that's why we like to use the park. We understand it's for the community. It's not just ours, but we do like to use it because it's in the best position. And I know from all the business owners that we've spoken to as well have always told us, yes, we want the events here, keep the events here, because your events attract people that may otherwise never have come to our village or come into the shop. They don't know it's there. That's why we like to have our events there, to share it with the village and to bring business to our members.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do, indeed.
So, Judy Esposito, 48 Chapman Street. Been a village resident for 37 years. My husband had a business here for 34 years. But,
Hey,
the
good
one-
Rotarians at that.
Huh?
Good Rotarians at that.
And so anyway, but one thing, you know, in getting this committee, the purpose of me going around to all the businesses and people in the park and vendors and everything was to generate interest in the committee. And the one thing I did say is, you know, we're not kicking anyone out. You know, the past is past. And, but there's problems in the park, and there's not only problems with the Bishop's Suite, but there's problems with the sidewalks and handicap accessibility. They're uneven. People in wheelchairs can't get to, you know, where they have a hard time getting. There's a place in there where the land goes down. It needs to be leveled, filled in. It also gets very wet when it rains. That one part. I did mention the burning bush. So there's lots of, and if there's a tree that is slated to come down because it's a danger. So, you know, there's other problems in the park that need to be addressed other than just Bishop's Suite. So I just wanted everyone to understand that. Okay. I think we covered a lot of stuff that I already had. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
Mark and I were in
Name?
Gina Morosi, 10 Old Glory Lane, Ballston spot. Mark and I, the administrator, and Jeff and Scott from the DPW had a meeting in the park regarding Family Fun Day this past week. And once we were getting towards the end of the meeting, I started walking around, looking at flower beds, looking at the trees, looking at the shrubs, looking at everything. Now, I'm not a member of the home and garden club or anything like that, but I do a lot of flower work and plantings at my home. And I'm walking around and I'm saying to myself, I said out loud, Jen.
You didn't say it to yourself at all.
I said it out loud. What's the problem here? That for years, all I've been hearing is trees and Bishop's Suite, and this needs to be redone. And I'm sorry, Ray, I don't agree with your plan. But anyway, no one is taking a hedge trimmer to those shrubs at all. No one goes in there and digs up weeds, or I'm speaking. Digs up weeds. You give me, and I said to, what did I say to you, Jen? You can verify this. Give me a crew, a Kubota machine in 2 days, and I can whip this park into much better shape. It's like everybody wants to do everything in the park, but for years, nobody has done nothing. And all it does is get progressively worse. It's all talk, no action. And I'm here to tell you that that park can be whipped into shape. Maybe not a boutique park, maybe not flower gardens like you're gonna find at Yaddo, but it can be whipped into shape and it can be done easily and quickly. Thank you.
In the person, 20 High Boulevard. I went to the meeting last week with Judy for the Friends of Wiswell, and I've been on the fence as to whether I'm going to join it or not because I have a million questions. That's just who I am. Done right in 10 of your meetings. I will just ask you a million questions and I can tell you that. But through my things here, I agree with you that the park is in horrible shape, but might I ask you why you haven't done it? It seems that this village, everybody just goes ahead and does it. It's, you know,
I'll answer that for you.
I mean, most of my life I have lived in a city. So city governments are way different than village government. So having lived here for the last over 14 years, however long we've been here, it seems like forever. You know, I love this village and I'm getting to know what kind of living in a village is like. But it seems to me there have been too many people involved in running this village and helping it out. The Rotary had these plans for the park. I have your here. I didn't like them. I asked on the map, I said, how, because Judy passed these out last week. I said, what kind of, footage are we talking about? The perimeter of the park that's not on here. And then all these shrubs and plantings that you had. I said, how many people can fit in this park with everything you put on here? So, to me, you just have to get a vision of what you want in this park. My suggestion, and I said to Julie, and I'll say it again tomorrow night, is that I really feel we need to go to the farmer's market and we need to ask the people who are using the farmer's market, using Wiswell Park, what do you want in this park? What do you think we should do? The benches Judy has brought up, Rotary donated those. And I don't think so. Oh, I thought Rotary did. Oh, okay, I take that back. But my point is, they're in a public park. Why aren't they maintained? You know, why? I personally feel our DPW department should be expanded and giving more people to do the benches, fix the steps up to the Tickisco Trail, do the weeds, do things. So I just, you know, I feel like the village has got to say what you are going to do in return for the people who might come and build you something. Give you something.
I just want to say two things related to that. Number one, working on that expanding DPW thing. We got final interviews coming up with the labor, so we're trying to build there. And I've also committed Jen more time focusing on DPW administrative efforts with Jeff to make sure that he's covered and doesn't lose track of things like this as much as well, because it's easy to do with everything he faces day to day. So we're working on that, absolutely. Number two, I will add, not just the farmers market folks we need to talk to. I know Diana and Natalia are here, Clay Hollow and DB Trends, and folks like them. When we did our small business door to door that one day, it was Wiswell Park discussion first and foremost. Take care of this park. They had all these ideas on things that would make it better to avoid the closure, et cetera. Make sure you include definitely the businesses. I know you've been trying, Judy, so just don't lose sight of that because it's huge. It is a huge thing because again, they're the ones that stare at it all day and see what happens in it all day. So they're going to know best what is missing or what could be fixed ultimately, at least from the superficial side of it, not necessarily the overall nuts and bolts of what's underneath and all that stuff. So we have to, take our resources as we get them, and those are some great resources, our business owners here. Only brief because we usually don't let you get double dip here.
Okay, thank you, Judy Esposito, for your Chapman. The sewer study or sewer problem that may be underneath Wiswell Park, I think that really needs to come up to the forefront of, so that we know what to do, what we can invest in, in the next year or so.
Well, then we being the village of Ballston Spa here, I just want to make it clear that ultimately it's going to be up to us to assess and address, as we said on the phone today. It's assess, then address. We will get there on
But
that.
if there's a sewer problem under the park, that will have to be taken care of before any changes.
Understood. Okay, I saw hands in the back, Bob.
Bob Kavanaugh, 20 Crestline Drive, Forest Park. Just for everybody's benefit. Just a couple of things. The benches in the park need more than paint. They're gone too far. The wood is rotten. They need to be rebuilt or replaced. Plain and simple. You're wasting your time to paint.
We haven't looked at everything.
What's that?
We didn't look at every bench yet.
They've been ignored long enough, and the wood on them is rotten, and the metal frames are rusted and corroded. So figure a way to move past that.
Don't tell John Cromie I'm saying this, but Bob's kind of the unofficial historian around here.
Second thing, about this stuff with the PDD earlier. All I want to say is for this board, certain people, you know who you are, you just totally reject anything that these people put out. They put out a quality product with a hell of a lot of work. 5-0, they said, dump it. 5-0. When we did stuff on water meters, the people said, no, don't do that. Stuff with the extra cost, the extra $50. That was it unanimous, Pete? Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Other than this. Right. Went right on with it, and you did something else that the people don't want. So you're not really our representatives. You sit there, you take a paycheck, you talk, and you make progress in this village slow to a crawl. and you don't listen to the people. That's all I've got to say.
Think about, anybody else? Right,
George Smith.
yeah,
Ray Allen, 16 Little Avenue. I want to answer a couple questions that were thrown out. That drawing that you're looking at was a preliminary drawing that was done for free by somebody who makes his living doing that and saying, this might work. And there's a lot of schmoozing that needs to go on with that plan. So that was not like a final plan. This is how you have to do it. It was never, ever put out that way. It was a suggestion. And we were going to obviously we were coming before the planning board to see if it was going to be right.
and I'll vouch for you in this. Pete Champagne told me the same thing. I got a chance to sit down with him because I wanted to hear him out. He wanted to talk about stuff.
Right.
And he said the same exact thing. It was a very preliminary plan, and what you said, everything else matches up.
And I also want to say that Liz put a lot of work into those 2 pages that she came at me with. And I own everything that I said in all of those. As a member of the committee, I was asked to put them out to people, and I did. So I own everything in there. If I put something on paper, I'm not going to say, well, I never said that. Again, I own it. A lot of people don't own what they do, don't own what they say. I do. And you can ask anybody that knows me. I do. And third, I would like to suggest that this village dissolve the committees and those commissions and whatever else, because the board has final say on everything. They don't listen to the planning board. They wanted to change the ethics board so it fit their agenda. The park and tree is a joke. It's, you know, I've been on it since its inception, and we're told now that we are supposed to bring to the board suggestions for how much money to spend and things like that. We're not just an advisory board. So I would just suggest that all those go away. And as Carla said, we got more commissions and boards and committees than, you know, probably New York City and Los Angeles put together. But it's just ridiculous. It really is. Just leave it to you guys, and you make the determinations of everything that this village needs, whether or not. And I still would love to see all the support for what you guys are going after. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Anybody else in the house here? Yes, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Besher, 14 Bath Street, also owner of Waverly Square, which is 19 Low, which is a couple doors up from the park, but I'm not speaking as a business owner. I'm speaking as a resident. I've lived here for 7.5 years. Prior to that, I would drive through this village. My best friend has lived here for 30 years. That park, the village, the downtown was the thing that just called to me, and I wind up moving here. Go figure. This thing's been committed to death. It's a quarter of an acre. It needs to be cleaned up. We've got a Kubota. We have a Kubota. Literally, it needs to be cleaned up. I realize all that, but if you take that and continue to committee it to death and change it from the thing that I, as a non-resident, would drive by and say, there's the village square. There's the place that the Christmas parade, the holiday parade winds up at. There's the place I know where the farmers market. I just live here. I don't know where Kelly Park is. I'm sorry. But I know that when I'm coming here, there's the farmers market on Saturday morning. You make it into a meditation garden, you make it into just whatever, you are losing part of the soul of this village. You can fight over the buildings, you can fight over the exteriors and the height and all that. That part is the heart of this village, and you are wrong, and you're just killing it by this BS. Just find some people who want to volunteer their time and get the friggin' weeds out, plant some grass, let the farmers, we don't need to ask the farmers what they want. They want a space to sell their stuff for 3 months a year, a day and a half for 3 months, and then the rest of the time is the car show, which draws, I can't tell you the number of people who come to our store who ask what's going on at Wiswall. It's the farmer's market, or there might be something else, or it could be a Friday and there's going to be a movie. That's what it's there for. You guys are killing it with this ridiculous procrastination. Get it cleaned up. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's the heart of this village. the village isn't perfect, so it doesn't need to be. Okay, wait a minute, back to vote.
Hi, Natalia Martinez. I'm the owner of Clay Hollow at 40 Front Street.
What's your home address, just for the clerk?
It's 9 Pheasant Run.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to mention and kind of piggybacking on everything that's been said at Wiswell Park. As a business owner that stares at Wiswell Park all day long, and saying, kind of supporting exactly what she just said, that park needs to be a flexible space. As many of you participated or saw, we, DB Trends and I just threw an event in that park that was really nice and really successful. But the reason that I think is because Wiswell Park lends itself to that flexibility where you can place vendors in different areas of the park. One area of the park can become musical, the other part can be an area where kids are running around, and then you have this flow that can move around. When you add too many structures to it or too many flower beds, then it becomes constrained in what it can be. And because it is the square, it needs that flexibility. So I just wanted to stress that. And also, when you are considering events that are going to be hosted by small businesses, I know you started kind of talking about that a little bit in Plan B, just to keep in mind, to keep it friendly towards small businesses, because a lot of us are single person operations. So when these projects come into play, just kind of keep us in mind, because we are really trying to dedicate ourselves to this and kind of blood, sweat, and tears into putting on events. So we want to make sure, please make sure that these kind of events cater to us smaller guys. And when you're thinking about, ripping up the sewer and doing stuff on Front Street, to really keep in mind the selling season, because for us, if you do anything between now and December, you will really kill our ability to earn money.
And that's why I said that to Jeff the way I did, because it was just too late this year to really start considering even moving in that direction. There are other streets we can pave this year and then get that full action plan together. So by all means, you're 100% right there. Anything else you want to say? Mark in the back.
Mark Leck, 10 Thompson Street. For Family Fun Day, Gina and Rosie and I went to see executive at Curtis Lumber. We spoke about them supporting Family Fun Day, and they loved the idea. But one thing he said two things. One, he said he wanted the birdhouse program coming back because it aligns with their, to promote the trend, the trades, which we completely agreed about. The other thing was more interesting. What he said was he cannot support the bill. He cannot get involved in the village politics the way they are. Meaning he understood that what's going on here in this village is really toxic. And from his point of view as a business, he cannot get involved. His business, British Lumber, cannot get involved in it. It's bad for their business. And I don't think, we're here arguing and fighting, and people are going rogue, and people are, you guys are talking to the press in negative connotations, and we have bad articles coming out about this village. I don't think you realize how damaging it is to this village as a way to get support, but for programs, for nonprofits, for the village, to keep our businesses. A company like Curtis Lumber brings a lot of money and supports this village in a lot of ways. And all this politicking that's going on is really damaging the reputation of this village. When a company like Curtis Lumber says if it continues to get bad, we will not have anything to do with the village, is a really telling thing. And that is concerning, not just from someone who's trying to raise money, but someone who's trying to do something to help this village. It hurts all of us. So, as many people have said, I think we really need to examine what's going on. All this politicking, name calling, back and forth sides, Republicans versus Democrats, all that stuff.
Mark, 15 seconds.
I'm done.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Christine?
I'm Christine Fitzpatrick, 31 Chapman Street. On July 5th,
I attended a county meeting of the Building and Lands Committee because I believe that the move of the county, or the possibility of the move of the county out of the Village of Ballston spot, is the single biggest challenge, if you will, threat, maybe another word, that we're facing. I attended that meeting. I was the only citizen who did attend, and I was just wanted to report that what they're saying is that they are still on track to have a report around Labor Day. And also what I found interesting is that they said that as they prepare for the budget, that they aren't going to have, they do not want to have any big expenditures for any departments to put in for any big expenditures. I was impressed with the process, with how long, how expeditiously they went through things. But I was disappointed. I just want to reiterate that I do believe, and I want to keep this on the forefront. I understand that people are talking to Steve Bolger, but I really think for this board, that what the county is going to do, what they're coming out is a huge issue for us. And I was somewhat disappointed that I was the only person from the village sitting there. I think that there should be a village representative at every one of these meetings. And I intend to do the best I can to go. And I also have to say, there's an old saying that said, I don't think as well-meaning as these county people are, as well-meaning as Scott Ostrander is and Eric Connolly are, they're going to be looking toward what benefits their towns. We're not going to be first and foremost. So I think we have to stand in our own truth, look to our own business. And there's an old saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I don't want us to be on the menu. I really think that members, staff person, members, trustee, we should be attending every one of these meetings. And that's my statement on that. On the PDD, I compliment you on your flexibility about wanting to make this optional. I think that's a very good idea. I also think probably another workshop is, while it might be painful, it's probably necessary. And I do think that, there's this comment that we're not listening to the people. I found it interesting. I was at that meeting and none of my comments, which were somewhat supportive of the PPD, made it into anything. So I guess both sides of the people are not being heard. But I do compliment the planning board on what they did. Thank you.
As you said, I do communicate with Steve Bolger surrounding those meetings, and he shared that nothing has changed with respect to their timing and everything else. That Kuznets, I ran into him as well, the board supervisors chairman. They are, whether you want to distrust them or not, they are being very transparent with respect to what is going on with us. And as I said in the last meeting, they know it does not benefit them to treat the village badly if they do end up moving out of here. So even if they were not well-intentioned, they're smart enough to know that you've got to do something here to make sure the village doesn't get creamed in the process of this whole thing. So I trust them in that they're going to continue communicating with us. Is the county going to do what the county wants to do ultimately? Sure. But it doesn't mean that we can't work with them in planning and also making sure that the village gets something in this whole equation to balance things out. We talked about that before too. And like I said, this is a subject of a future special meeting / discussion I want to have with business owners, et cetera, to make sure that they understand what this all means ultimately.
I just want to respond also. I share your concern about this momentous issue that we're facing, and I think it would behoove the board to actively engage with the county, perhaps beyond Steve Bolger, and then on our own behalf, and then also the more village people who can raise your voices with the SBPA. This is critical to your mobilize to make your needs and interests known, it can only serve and help you. So I think now is the time to provide that input to the county to know that you are paying attention, you care, and you may also have ideas for that that they can consider in their plan.
Lisa? Lisa, could you come forward just so the microphone can catch you, because that air thing is gonna block it.
Lisa Spidell, 106 Prospect Street, Ballston Spa. I wasn't going to speak tonight, so Christine just spoke, and I'm an employee in that building there, and I think what people have to take into consideration is that this county is growing. It's not just the Village of Ballston Spa. We have, numerous employees go. I'm working in a building that we have leaks, that we've had to move our files. You say that building's too tall. Well, we've got building crumbling. I don't know if the public knows that, but we've had to move our files because we can't walk there because they don't want us there. They don't want the weight there. The building's old and we need to make some changes. You're not losing the entire county. We've got buildings up there at the jail. The new public safety building has been built. You have social services that's there. You're not losing the entire county. You still have that. And they're keeping that in mind. People are still gonna come down here. They're not gonna, this is where I live. I'm gonna have to inconvenience myself and drive to wherever they may be planning on going. But I still have to come through here and I still have to be here. We might have to reinvent. Maybe your stores are gonna have to be open past 5 o'clock because I'm not gonna be able to be here for lunch, but maybe I'll get dinner. So maybe you have to readjust and we all have to adapt to change. And with the Pdd and whatever, I don't know anything about that. And all the legalities of it and everything else, but change is gonna happen. I don't want a big, huge monstrosity either. But if that's what it's gonna take, if that comes down, maybe that's the better spot for it than putting it right here in the center. So I don't know how I don't wanna call it spot zoning or whatever. I don't know enough about that because that's not what I do. But change is gonna happen and we have to adjust to that. I don't like it either.
15
But
seconds.
it is what it is. So let's take that into consideration.
Do you have an idea of how many employees work in the main building?
Which main building? So there's more than one building
Well,
over
the building
there.
on
Yeah.
McMaster.
The building on McMaster, well, our office alone, I'm gonna say we're probably about 40 employees, the district attorney's office. And then you have, and you don't have just, don't forget this, you have the court system there. That's not just county workers, that's state workers. So this isn't just a county decision. This is, state's gotta move too, not just us.
Well, I'm pretty distressed hearing your comments about the building because.
But that's why they're looking into this. I
understand it from their side.
It's renovate or move type of idea. They're gonna wait
Right,
and process the
either
minuses.
they put money into it to fix those things and then the employees stay, which would be the best for the village. Or, the question is are they gonna take the building down? That costs a huge amount of money, or are they just gonna leave it?
I believe from,
Frank has discussed that, and Mayor Rossi has discussed that, I believe, previously in previous meetings, that has been discussed. If this were to happen, this would be, and I'm not gonna speak for you, but I think that was discussed of what would happen with that, and eventually, that you would have to, the county's not gonna leave the village like with this piece of crap building.
Do we have that in writing?
Well, but again, we're not there yet, Liz. and
Okay, all right, no, I know, but that's the thing that
was my
worries
point.
me.
I have definitely had that point made into the county multiple times now, that would not be the best possible scenario to have those buildings remain. Again, I don't own the buildings, so there's only so much you can say and do in these situations,
Yeah, I
but
know.
I can definitely lend some credible thoughts and views from my perspective too.
Yeah, and that's an example where maybe there would be one decision if there was no voice from the village and a different decision if there were multiple voices.
Mark, you already went. Let's avoid double dip if I can, because you went for 3 minutes. Anybody else in the room? We'll have another one coming up. Anybody on Zoom? I saw 2 hands earlier, then they disappeared, I feel like.
They did, and so did people who raised them.
Okay, going. If you want to talk, don't forget, we do have the second public comment period coming up right after these motions that should be somewhat quick. That's all. Here we go. I get a motion that the attached budget transfers be approved. Trustee Raymond,
I'll second.
trustee Fandesa, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion that Union Fire Company number 2 be authorized to expend the amount of $3,792.38 for mercury LED monitor and mid-range nozzle?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Raymond,
I'll second.
trustee Fandesa, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion that Union Fire Company number 2 be authorized to expend the amount of $3,808 for 28 Armor-Tex attack hoses?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Cormos.
I'll second. I'll second.
I'll give it to trustee Baskin. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion that Union Fire Company number 2 be authorized to expend the amount of $9,621 for 9 Scott 4500 PSIG 30-minute bottles?
I'll make a motion.
Trustee Fandesa.
Second.
Trustee Cormos. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion ratifying the emergency purchase by Union Fire Company number 2 for an air compressor on June 30th, 2022 for the price of $1,099.99 and for subsequent labor for installation totaling $1,347.60.
I'll make a motion.
Trustee Fandesa.
I'll second.
Trustee Baskin. Discussion?
Is that in their budget or is this additional?
They're gonna get it out of their budget. It's not coming out of contingency.
Further? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This was the Matt Damon of motions, I called it, but we're actually going to do it this time. Got to get a motion that the village enter into a site lease agreement with a contract with Dish Wireless LLC for installation, operation, maintenance, and management of a telecommunications facility on the John Street Water Tower, and that the mayor is hereby authorized to execute the agreement and any other documents necessary to effectuate the contract.
I'll make that.
Trustee Raymond.
Second.
Trustee Cormos, discussion. The final time on this one, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Yay. Oh, sorry.
She's fired.
Sorry. I've been dealing with them for the entire year I've worked here. I'm so glad the contract's up.
You and me both. It's been 3 months. Can I get a motion made by, can I get a motion that J&J Equipment is awarded the contract / purchase for the village's purchase of a new 435 sweeper with such purchase contingent on obtaining the USDA grant financing as detailed in the attached letter of intent?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Raymond,
I'll second.
trustee Fandesa, discussion.
We have a price.
It was in there in the letter.
Initial quote in the USDA application. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's.
It was in the letter, wasn't it? Yeah.
Are we required to get multiple quotes or?
No, we did through the bidding or
The state contract, yeah.
When we did the MSA.
Would be nice to know how much we're spending.
I swear it was in there. Yeah, it was in the letter.
Hold on, I don't have my glasses up for to read. 198,000.
There you go. All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion approving the water and sanitary sewer connection request for the proposed residents at 147 Lewis Street inside the village with the sanitary sewer connection approval conditioned upon the applicant receiving Saratoga County Sewer District approval?
I will make the motion.
Trustee Fandesa.
Second.
Trustee Cormos, discussion.
Is this a new home?
Proposed residents, so I'm
Okay.
assuming, yeah.
Just wondering, one more text.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Other business, anybody?
Yes, I have something.
Liz?
I'd like to propose a motion to adjust the rules of procedure. There's been, some meetings that are under the special meetings law, special meetings category, which aren't clarified in the rules of procedure, and I think that those should be clarified along with the emergency meeting. And so I propose that to that document, that the sentence on the first page, 1, 2, 3, So the fourth paragraph, the following shall apply to all meetings, including special and emergency meetings. And then that the remaining 7 items be put under that category, because the rest of the document applies to village meetings. And that under the second page on the third paragraph, that a sentence be put in that all trustees, all members of the board, in the case where Zoom video meetings are done, that they get on the panel representation or whatever the wording is, so that all board members can participate in emergency and special meetings.
Hey, Carl's going to need to see what your markup was. You got a red line there, right?
Yeah, I've got.
If you want to hand over, I'll hand it to her, and then I'll explain to the public what is going on here.
Yeah, okay. The only one that I did not do was on the video conferencing, which expires in a few days, but
She'll extend it
She'll extend it.
at this point with the
They're
administrative.
The reason that they keep extending it is because they get funds for DOE.
yeah, we didn't specifically say that under Zoom, you have the panel status or you have the audience status. That wasn't actually included in our rules of procedure. So I don't know, Carla, if you think the first part covers it.
I don't even know where you are with it. I'm sorry. I just pulled it up. So
That's what I'm saying, hand it over and let her review it. Well, I tell folks where this is coming from. Yeah, okay. Last meeting, I explained that we were gonna endeavor to have the meeting with Ed Martin, Ballston Spa Central School District, to discuss the High Boulevard street situation, street safety around Malta Avenue School, et cetera. And I said, after talking with Carla, to err on the side of no problems here, we would make it a special meeting so that if multiple members of the board wanted to come on to the Zoom as participants, actually, we're all participants technically, but as hosts or co-hosts, essentially, well, not as co-hosts, as participants, I'll stop there, that we would be okay. The intention of this discussion was Ed and I had discussions about ideas, about the problems he's been reached out about with Malta Avenue. And the idea was, hey, Ed, I think we should listen to the community around your school over there, especially those on and around High Boulevard, to say, here's some of the things that are being tossed around. I'll give you an example. Speed humps. We've heard that one a few times from different people. Now, that sounds great, but if I'm living on High Boulevard, I don't know if I want to go over those every darn day. And so I'd like to hear from the residents of that street to hear what they think about things like that. So the idea is more to just give a brief overview of where we were and listen to folks, residents, et cetera. And I had Thursday put out an email to everybody asking, is 2 o'clock on Wednesday okay? Didn't hear anything. So yesterday, put the graphic together, put it on my Facebook page, asked Terry to share it this morning once everybody got in, move forward. Then we finally, yesterday, 3 days later, got people saying, well, you should do it at a different time, et cetera. Well, I was trying to also meet Ed Martin's time frame and schedule as well. So then today's back and forth all around is emails about we want to be co-hosts, et cetera. Again, the whole idea here was a one-on-one discussion and bring in the public, bring in even the trustees if they wanted to talk, because this is how you conduct these types of things. And again, it was as a courtesy, we even went through the special meeting routine. Now we're trying to turn this into a debacle and a half. So we can pass this if you like, but I'm going to cancel the special meeting and go to a different methodology that will not require a special meeting on Wednesday. Because again, I'm not going to subject our guests essentially to a 5-on-1 scenario unnecessarily. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's appropriate. It's not what was considered in the first place. But now, having said that, anybody want to make a motion for Liz's rules of procedure? I guess technically Liz is making that motion.
Yeah.
Yes?
well, wait, have people seen this?
No.
You can't do that.
As somebody in the audience may have suggested, you can't do that.
Do you have this, you can email it to, like, does anybody have this to email it to people?
It's adding one sentence.
No, it's adding this entire thing.
No, that's part of the original. It's just indented to be that those items are covered in those two types of meetings. That's all I did. I didn't change any of the language. I added that first sentence, that's all. So,
Oh, okay.
so, you know, that's all, that's it.
All right, it looked familiar to me.
Yeah. That's what I wrote.
But you said there was something else as well?
Oh, I added, so, all right, so. Do you want me to kind of explain what's going on? So, the only thing that is added to the rules of procedure, is the language, quote, "The following shall apply to all meetings, including special and emergency meetings," end quote, and that's just your procedure. It just clarifies, correct me if I'm wrong, it clarifies that it applies to all meetings.
Yeah, not just to the village meetings. That's the change.
Okay. And then I added, there's a part about the whole legislation allowing you to have video conferences. There's a sentence that says, "In the event the board holds a virtual meeting or members of the board appear virtually, they shall be on camera at all times during the video conference, unless there are extenuating circumstances." I merely added, "They shall be on camera at all times during the video conference with panelist authority."
This one. So that's it. And
This is why
I
we
think
can't have
your
nice things, folks.
your characterization that we were going to, what was the term you used?
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's automatically go to an adversarial.
Sean, as I stated in an email today, I've co-hosted a video podcast for the last 5 years, a podcast overall for 14 years. When you're doing an interview or discussion scenario, having 6 people on the same screen isn't a great idea. It's also discomforting when it's imbalanced. If I had 4 co-hosts and me talking to the same athlete when I do my podcast, for instance, it's just not conducive to a discussion, especially when that discussion here is supposed to be focused on residents, their views, their wants and desires on this whole thing, so we can assess, what can the school district do to appease with us as well.
That's not how you describe this.
As I
meeting.
have absolutely multiple times. Carla did as well in her email today.
I
Liz.
guess I don't understand how it's any different from any other workshop.
It's a discussion between 2 people, essentially bringing in other people from the community. It's not centered on us, it's centered on them.
I don't see the difference.
Yeah,
A
workshop
workshop
is-
is still centered on them. If you provide public comment, it's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
As I said,
It seems
you
to
can
be.
pass this if you choose. The special meeting on Wednesday will be canceled, and I'll go a different avenue like Facebook Live and make sure we get it promoted quickly so that we still have the same.
But if you're gonna conduct official village business and then
If-
shut out fellow trustees, I
I'm not
don't understand that.
every day I'm conducting official village business, and I don't have to notice the fact I'm coming into the office to do so, do I?
No, well, the other thing I would ask is what traffic expert is going to be there? Because otherwise you're wasting the public's time talking about solutions that you don't even know. Because unless Ed Martin's a traffic expert, I don't think you are, there's nobody qualified to say, yeah, that'll work.
Nobody's
No.
making a decision, Sean. It is to listen to
I
the
understand.
residents.
I understand, but. if
So
you
then we
listen
come
to
back
them,
in with that
And
information.
nobody who's actually qualified to tell them, well, that won't work because of X. Now you have to go back and tell them, you just wasted
Hey,
their
Sean,
time.
Sean,
You said.
Sean, excuse me. Sean, how long have we had the pedestrian bicycle master plan discussed, all these different things with, how long has it been in the making?
It's been a while. And as a matter of fact, that I have an email that I sent before any of that, giving recommendations, including speed humps and the plus and minuses of them. Back when Mayor Woolbright asked me to do that, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years ago. And it just seems like we're reinventing the wheel here.
No, we're actually inventing a process that's actually going to result hopefully a lot faster than everything else we've tried. Because I've been mayor for 3 months and the only street we seem to focus on is High Boulevard and not Saratoga Avenue, not the street Spice Up and all those. We just seem to be focused on one and can't do a damn thing about it. And it's like, hey, here's a school district willing to work with us and put some money into it too. Let's make this happen, get the buy-in from the community as quickly as we can and go.
So Frank, why are you so afraid of us trustees being on the panel?
Have you ever gone to one of our meetings?
Some of our meetings have been better when, but this is a board. And this is an open meeting.
And the board will ultimately decide anything that comes out of that
Oh,
meeting.
here we go again.
Oh, I'm sorry, Liz, like I just said about, every day I'm entrusted to have conversations. I'm the mayor. Okay, every day I'm entrusted to conduct village business. The whole thing here, and as I said to Carla today, this was a courtesy. I'm regretting even extending a courtesy to you because you're morphing it into something it was never intended to be. If I'm at Martin, I back out myself at this point. There's no way in hell I could subject myself to this. No way.
Subject to what?
Are you gonna provide the public with the master plan? I can send you my email, all the work that's been done, because if you do, they're probably gonna answer about 95% of everybody's questions.
So you're telling me that you will put some engineer's report above the people that actually live there that have to walk that street every day? That's what you're telling me right now.
I'm gonna say that the engineer's report is what you can do or can't do according to Federal Highway Administration guidance and standards.
Can we drop the speed limit? Can we put speed humps there? Can we put your speed signs there?
You can't drop the speed limit.
Yes, you
unless
can.
No, you can't.
The legislature just allowed it
Oh, they did?
to 25.
Okay.
All right.
You forget the pedestrian and bicycle master plan had a lot of public input from.
And the study was done on one side of High Boulevard and not the other, according to the engineer
What
at,
do you mean one side? There's a whole.
that the study
plan.
was done on one side. This is why, one end, excuse me, thank you.
What? No, there was a traffic monitoring where we did that. Yes, that was done on one end, and I think more testing has to be done to verify what the problem really is.
So a school district wants a result in time for the September opening of school, and we're gonna go out and do another study.
Well, you should have data to
That's
support
right.
whatever you do. The scientific method,
Alana told me about the scientific method was only one end of the street, and I think Bernadette was a party to some of that conversation as well.
What the real question I had, the last meeting, I thought we were on the same page, but this is the way we're moving forward, and I guess I'm surprised with.
I don't disagree with that. I think we should move forward. And I don't understand why we can't collaborate, and it has to be done in a dictatorial manner.
It's not dictatorial, Sean.
I don't think that's what he was doing, but I just think he's just trying to simplify it, so it's a conversation for the residents, like, and.
By able to
Let him
control
finish,
what
let him
board
finish.
members can speak and can't speak.
Sean.
Yeah.
But
I.
it's moments like that right there, Sean.
Conversation for residents to have with,
I
I don't know.
The residents are eagerly want to give you their input. But
And they will
when
be
we-
able to.
But the problem is that you're treating this as if this is just your meeting, and I think the three of us can say we're going to attend, right? So now it has to be noticed, and it is a public
It's
meeting.
canceled.
Really?
It's now canceled.
I hate to say it, but it sounds rather childish.
You know, it's
Hold on,
canceled
hold
because
on.
I
Take your time, go home.
Hold on. The last meeting, we literally said, this is the process we're able to all attend. And everybody's like, okay, what literally happened from that meeting to now?
We did not realize that we would be zipped
You're
up.
not zipped. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time, guys. So I mean, it's just a one-time opportunity, not one time, but one time that we maybe don't talk and let the community talk. And that, I think
That would be fine if none of the trustees or the mayor talked, if you just introduced and then they, but he was planning on discussing solutions
proposed ideas that Ed and I discussed on a phone call between us, that I said, hey, let's talk to the people that live on those streets and see what they think of these as ideas too. And then we get to bring to the board.
So, then you looked at any studies you want to reduce the speed limit? Have you looked at any studies on the efficacy of reducing the speed limit?
If I looked at any of the studies,
On the efficacy of reducing speed limit?
I've read some of them in the past, yes, because I've been part of
Right,
the
and
municipalities where they
So
talk
you'll
about it.
find out that they virtually never work. Because it all goes back to the same thing.
However, in combination with the your speed is sign and also getting it enforced with police, it's a different world because the
Right,
speed
well, you
change.
don't have to do a combination. You could put a your speed is at 30 miles an hour. Is the speed right now. That's the first measure you could do, is that the first step you would do is to put those in, not change the speed limit. Again, but without having anybody with expertise who understands this, the public's gonna be completely unaware of all these facts. So,
I don't think, Carla, go ahead. You had something you wanted to jump in with.
I just want to make sure that we're still just on the motion. Because there was a motion made by Liz.
Nobody seconded.
I don't know if there was a second.
second,
So, okay, so there's a second. So now the discussion is solely on that motion. I'm just trying to move the process along.
Carla, can you just read at least the first sentence of the paragraphs that this impacts, the red,
I did.
the red part?
I read what she,
Under the first sentence, what does this impact in terms of how the meeting is?
it impacts the procedures of how the meeting is held.
So who gets
Such
to
as,
participate?
You want me to read what's already there?
Which is already in the document. but-
Okay.
Stay tuned. We have an executive session coming up later, folks.
I'm a little concerned about asking what I need. The following shall apply to all meetings, including special and emergency meetings. That's the new part. Do you want me to read all of them?
Just 7 points.
I know. Do you want me to read all of them?
Yes, I think
Okay.
they want to do. I know, but they don't.
Does the board want me to?
go ahead. I have
Okay.
it open, but I'm not sure.
I'm gonna read fast, so keep up. The presiding officer may debate, move, and take other action that may be taken by other members of the board. The presiding officer must recognize board members before making motions and speaking. A member, once recognized, shall not be interrupted when speaking unless it is to call him/her to order. If a member while speaking were called to order, he/she should cease speaking until the question of order is determined, and if in order, he/she shall be permitted to proceed. There is no limit to the number of times a member may speak on a matter. Motions and resolutions require a majority vote to be approved. Special meetings are called by the mayor or by any 2 board members. The clerk contacts the members, and if a quorum is available, notifies the official newspaper at least 24 hours in advance of the special meeting. Emergency meetings are called by the mayor or by any 2 board members. The clerk contacts the members, and if a quorum is available, notifies the official newspaper and posts the notice in the village hall. Executive sessions shall be held in accordance with New York State Public Officers Law, Section 105. All executive sessions shall be commenced in a public meeting. Everything I just read is already in your rules of procedure.
Speed reports really well.
That's good. So basically, the motion would ask that trustees be able to participate similarly to how the participation is here. I mean, in this case, Sean has a lot of expertise. In fact, he's the expert in the room on this issue, and Liz has a ton of history with the whole project. And it would make sense for, this is not a new thing. It would make sense to, as a board, to continue to work through this. I think, because they bring a lot to the discussion.
And I've given you 14 years worth of knowing how to run a discussion on social media, et cetera.
This is not a podcast.
Carla, I'm sorry. I heard you. Oh, I see. Would you mind sharing?
I was trying to ascertain whether it was necessary to include the language, the following shall apply. Because I took it that it already did apply to any and all meetings, but I think the issue, and Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, the issue is that at the top of the page, it just says, it talks about regular meetings.
Right.
And then it says
then talks about what happens at meetings, and it doesn't say it includes special and emergency meetings.
This actually Frank pointed that out when I asked for us to be panelists. He said, no,
Actually-
it's not covered by.
Actually,
rules of
John
procedure."
Mancini pointed out from Nikon.
Well, he pointed out that it wasn't covered by rules of procedure, so that's why I made the motion to include it, because I think it's the way any meeting that we have should go.
Again, this is why we can't have nice things, folks.
Well, there's been a motion and a second. You're in discussion on this motion.
It's not nice things. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Trustee Weindenka,
No, I think it's unnecessary change.
trustee Rayner,
Yes.
trustee Baskin,
Yes, I don't see any reason not to.
trustee Cornrows,
Yes,
Mayor Rossi,
Yes. Please note that the special meeting on Wednesday is canceled. I have no problem with the idea of doing that. However, if that was the intent in the first place, it should have been in there in the first place. The idea was basically special meetings could be conducted in a special way. And that's why it was written most likely in that format, and to allow us to do things like what was intended on Wednesday. Obviously, it's not the intention. If we're going to do these meetings this way, we're going to do these meetings this way. And I'll use the other avenues by which to hold these discussions via social media. There are ways to do it, and it was discussed with John today. So you took your own courtesy and kind of hung yourself with it over here. I hate to tell you.
So whatever meeting you have is unofficial.
I'm allowed to do that, yes.
okay. So I think we should call a special meeting to allow the public to input officially.
this is where Curtis is winning.
Unnecessary.
Well, file that with the clerk if you think so.
Well,
There's a
I mean,
procedure.
if this, I call for public input, and I know a lot of residents on Hyde Boulevard would want to tell you what they think.
Yes,
what they-
Liz, and they were going to have the opportunity, the exclusive
If
opportunity.
you do the meeting and not be,
Liz,
okay,
public comment number 2. Carol.
Hi, Carol Johnson, 91 Church Ave, Ballston, New York. First of all, when I read that post that you put on there, my thought was, great, you're gonna get people involved. Does anybody here on board, other than a few that I know what information means? Liz, do you know what information means?
I believe I do.
Oh, could you explain it to us? Because I don't think you do. That meeting with Ed and Frank was information, input from the village of Ballston Spa that you live in. Frank here is trying to do something to get the public involved. Why do you feel that you have to be part of that? He can't, like, okay, say I'm a boss in a bus garage. Me and somebody else have a meeting. I gotta take the secretary with me. I gotta take this one with me. Why should that be? I'm the boss.
He's not our boss.
Not saying, well, I don't think he wants to be your boss.
No,
But
he's not.
anyways, I'm just saying, that was an informational piece. That's why he was going to have that meeting.
He can still
And
have
you,
it.
I'm talking.
Sorry.
It was an informational thing that other residents could get involved with that may not come to these meetings. It was gonna be Zoomed. So why couldn't you be on Zoom?
I'm perfectly willing. I think the idea of getting public feedback is excellent. And the only reason it's
Well, you
being
know what the point, the whole-
canceled is because he doesn't like the fact that we might input.
It's my 3 minutes. Now I added 2 onto that, thank you. So, information was from the public. Do you really think that they want to have a Zoom while people in the public are giving their thoughts, their input, and have you there saying, no, can't do that, no, can't do that. That's what he was getting away from. Is from you guys up there making comments. He wants to hear from the public. And Ed Martin's a very smart guy. He's not stupid at all. I know the man personally. So what you just did, or had Frank, the mayor, do, you just kicked yourself in the butt. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Right.
I just wanted to make a note on two things. We also were one, you had brought up about the counties awarding not-for-profits. We were one that was fortunate that we got $15,000 or are getting $15,000. Part of that is going to allow us to use more money out of our donations that we get in to put towards family fun day. I haven't talked to these guys about that, but we will be making another donation towards family fun day. Money. Mark, start spending.
Julia?
She's off limits this week, Mark.
So, that has helped us to do that. And that's where, as a not-for-profit, that's where our money goes back into the community 100%. We're also authorized today, going to have an extra team on. We won't have them at Family Fun Day because it will just mess up the whole flow of things. But we are going to have a third crew on that day from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, just in case, especially with the fact that we're running the morning portion of that is going to be for those people that are special needs. And at night, you're going to have the refrigerators. What do people keep in the refrigerators? Beer. So you may have a few, so there may be a few extra people there that maybe might get our help. So we have authorized that to go forward. Last thing I want is this, what was it, on Lewis Street? Where it's connected, they're going to build a house. Is that where they took down all those trees? Like on the corner? Because I know
Bordeaux, it's a Bordeaux scenario. I think he came by to make sure that we're pressing on it. I can tell you that much.
Okay, well, there's going to be a house built. That's what this says. Is there a sidewalk requirement for new housing that you have to have a sidewalk put in when you do that?
In the code.
It's in the code.
Yeah.
All right, and that includes the other lot that's on next to your house up there. That will have a sidewalk on there. Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Okay.
And I will be putting in a sidewalk at the same time. Because of the savings.
Getting reimbursed.
Excuse me. Gina.
Gina from 610 Glory Lane. Are you guys getting reimbursed for your sidewalk?
Whatever the normal rate is at the time, yeah. That this time, we committed, we've asked Carla to say whether we can commit that we won't. If we raise the reimbursement amount, we won't take the difference.
Why would you do that? Why would you leave it for less fortunate people in the village to redo their sidewalk? I didn't take a dime. You're rich. Neither do we. Whoa. You're jealous.
Well.
Okay, well, whoever on this panel is going to put a sidewalk in, remember to get a permit first. Michelle.
Come on,
Speaking of
Rich.
Michelle Bashar, 14 Bath Street. This is the crap that's embarrassing when this gets out to the public. There are certain people on the board whose main, I think, frame of dealing here is in resist mode. Fight back and don't let anything get done. Again, you're committing this to death. I'm so embarrassed by parts of this and so frustrated by most of it. And we didn't get money either, and we're not rich. So that was uncalled for and uncomely to you. That was unseemly for a board member of this level. We should apologize to everybody because that shouldn't happen. And regardless, she's still a resident, but you were supposed to be slightly above that. And that shows the type of demeanor that has come out these last few months
And it's less than getting things done, and it's more about just keeping things from getting done because you want to make your point. And I'm getting frustrated as a resident and as a business owner, and it's embarrassing.
Yes.
Mark Fleck, 10 Thompson Street. I would like to echo what she says, but I'd also like, there are groups that are trying to market this village, that are trying to put out the goodwill and to bring people in. With the county buildings potentially leaving, we need to market this village in a positive way. Things like the things that the BSPPA are doing, things that Family Fun Day is doing, things like the programs that I brought into the village, market this village in a positive way. And I hope if you're really concerned about, if you are concerned about the county leaving, about raising money for this village, supporting our businesses, you will back any of these programs that market this village in a positive way. And when I mean support them, I mean put money behind them, because none of these programs are free to produce. We don't just pull Family Fun Day out of our hats. Out of our hats and do it. Some of us are putting our own monies behind this, our own time, putting a lot of time behind it, and we need the support of the village.
Well, you're getting $8,500.
That's nothing. That's not even half of what we're spending.
Okay, well,
Okay.
are other
So
entities putting in more than 8,500?
Yes, not
Yes.
more than 8,500, other people and.
people are stepping up.
And Ray
But-
just offered you more money. What
So
is the
I want to
problem?
point out that we should get, all right, go ahead.
Why
Finish
are you
and then I'll
badgering
respond.
that?
Sorry.
You don't
I'll
understand.
respond. Go ahead.
You don't understand how much, one, these projects cost, and two, how much they mean to the community. And not just to the people of the community, but to bring people into the community, to market our village in a positive light. And as I said in my last thing, we are fighting an uphill battle when companies like Curtis Lumber is telling us they are one step away from stepping away from our village because of things like this that's going on tonight. It all gets back to them. Businesses understand what's going on in this village, and they are running. It makes our job so much more difficult. Those of us who are trying to help this village.
So can I respond?
Of course.
So I think, I'll speak for myself. I do understand the importance of Family Fun Day and events like that. I was a supporter of that. I think this board should be recognized for providing the seed money to get this whole thing going. We put in the first $8,500. We're apparently still the largest single donor. I definitely appreciate all the time you and Gina and everybody else are putting into it. But the village, I don't think it's fair to say the village doesn't understand the importance of this, the village doesn't support it, because we do, and we are supporting it, and I'm glad and thankful that you're doing it.
Can I ask one favor, Ben? And I don't usually do this, but I gotta ask for one favor here. Could you tell one of your biggest supporters that decides to, all the time on Facebook, et cetera, state that I gave my sister $7,500 or $8,500? Could you let that person know what you just said? That essentially it was this board that made that decision, not me, not something I brought here, anything like that, because it undermines and demeans the event to a way that is so beneath even that person, no matter what I think of him lately. It's ridiculous. And it hurts that event. I'm sick of hearing it. I'm sick of seeing it. It was not given to my sister or anything else. It was given to this community. Correct?
Yeah, I didn't say that.
Well, I would
don't
ask
know
you
anything about it.
to, I would ask you to communicate that to okay? I'm sick of seeing it, Ben. I really am. It's not fair. It's not appropriate. I just want to make that clear.
It's not me either.
I have 30 seconds. I must have 30 seconds.
You do.
Do I?
I'm not saying anything.
I did.
Okay. Ben, excuse me, Michelle Bouchard again. Ben, you didn't give them the money. The taxpayers of this village did. You owe us an apology for holding you to it.
Anybody else in the
I
room?
said the board.
The
provided
board
funds.
didn't,
Yeah.
the taxpayers did, and
Michelle.
that's what you were there for, not you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Chris Dubuque, 6 Kaling Drive. I had no intent of talking tonight. I came down because Friends of Wistful Park was something I was interested in. I co-lead an organization of volunteers for this county, not just for Boston Spa. I was here one night, spoke with the mayor in the hallway. This is difficult to see. I'll be completely honest with each and every one of you, because this is why we started the organization that we have. Nothing gets done with this bickering, these policies, these rules. I work for the state. I know how rules and how policies work. The unprofessionalism, the lack of acting like adults. When you're not the leaders, somebody else in this community has to step up and do that. And that's what we've been doing. And that's why we wanted to do Wistfall Park, because again, I agree, that attracted my family to this village. We lived up in Milton. Milton was beautiful, still is beautiful. Why would I want to live in a village? Wistfall Park is within walking distance. Hyde Boulevard, again, I'm concerned with the traffic that goes through there because I walk through there, but I'm also concerned with other streets in this village. But how the hell are you going to get anything done? You can't even agree on one street, one school. How's it get done? It doesn't. I worked out at Tryon. That was where I started my state career. It is shut down now. It became dangerous. It became untenable. And this is why. We had piss poor leadership. The only thing that ever got done, the only people who ever kept kids safe in that facility were people like myself and my coworkers who decided to not listen to anybody in leadership, but do it ourselves. And that's what we'll do with this village. We'll clean that park up if we have to ourselves, because it's not getting done here. You have all these committees, you argue, you bicker, you're recorded for God's sakes. This is on public record. You should be embarrassed. I know most everybody in this room, whether it's Eagle Matt Lee, whether it's Talk with Mark in the hallway, whether it's even Liz speaking with my special needs son for hours on end about flowers. Each and every one of you have something positive to bring to this conversation, but you rather bicker like kids. For crying out loud, my kids could do a better job organizing this village and getting stuff done. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm not trying to raise my voice, but you need to wake the hell up. Because what the mayor was trying to do with the school probably got more results than having this whole committee in. And sorry, Sean, I'm talking about all the rules and regulations. I work for the goddamn state. They can't figure out the rules and regulations out. That's why it doesn't run as well. And that's why people are leaving New York. That's why people are leaving Boston Spa. It's reality. This is what I do for a living now with the Department of Labor. I get people jobs in New York. I get people jobs in the county. And they're gone. Why I live here? You pay so much in taxes, and this is where it goes to. Getting nothing done. Wake up, move forward, reach across the table, do the workshops, and get something done. We are a community here. Or that won't be the only county building that leaves. There'll be more.
I'd like to respond. I'd be happy to do the workshop, but unfortunately, the mayor canceled it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Childish, over childish.
It's just a fact.
He had a meeting you all could have gone to. You had to have it a certain way. Stop it and grow up.
Thank you for censoring yourself, Bob. Bob Brooks.
Bob Buster, what's your chat? I can't really go much better than what he just did. You know, I came from the firehouse meeting every month, 9:30. You guys are even starting these motions. I wasn't here before, so I don't know what was discussed. I didn't know. The fact is that it's almost 10:30 and we're still here because you guys are good from back and forth. Real long.
Yeah, okay. Everybody in the room counted for? See a hand up there? I'm gonna guess who it is. Go ahead.
Nathan
It's not, it's not. Okay, good.
It's
Nathan, go ahead.
actually, it's not Nathan Ward either. It's actually Claire Superack. We live together at 1 Hyde Boulevard.
No
And
problem, Claire.
thank you. I just wanted to express an interest in participating if there does end up being a workshop for the road improvements around Malta Elementary School. We do live on the corner of Malta and Hyde, and I do notice frequently people are biking on the wrong side of the street. I mean, I could make a whole list, and I'm happy to provide written comments about what I've seen at the intersection if that would be helpful. Of course, there's summer camps that walk down to the pool, and it is a concern in this area that a kid will get hit by a car at some point. So I hope that that is something that is open to the public, or there's at least an opportunity for the public to provide some comments on any future improvements to the area. And I'd also just like to thank you for considering making improvements. I guess it's been something that's been kind of on my mind since we moved into the village. It is obviously a busy intersection, and I think improvements would be great.
Like I said, I'm gonna figure out something, tune in tomorrow to social media, we'll figure out the right avenue, I'll talk to Ed, see what we do with it. I'm intent to get the input, that is what started this whole thing in the first place, a desire to get input, in quote, buy-in from the residents for things that might not be the easiest things to swallow if you live there as well. I don't like this idea that we just say, here's an engineering report and you're gonna live with it, because for instance, do you know that the study done suggested that the average speed on the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit was 31, which would assume that people that at High Boulevard feel that people are going excessive speeds all the time are wrong? Well, I don't necessarily think that everybody that lives on High Boulevard is wrong on this one, or maybe 30 is just something that's faster than we think it should be. Maybe there's a reason New York City dropped 30 down to 25 when they did. So it's things like that to sort of hear out and get that feeling from people. And so Claire, we'll work on getting something together this week with that, okay?
Great, thank you. Yep.
Reluctance to hold this meeting.
Liz,
because-
I've explained it 13 different ways. I think we are past that point. Anybody else on Zoom? Is that the only one that was?
That was it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were waiting for me.
General prevention.
No, not I got that.
Anyway, board comments, questions, concerns?
I just want to thank Chris and everyone who spoke up. And I do apologize. You know, all of us have something to contribute to making people upset tonight. So at least from me, I do apologize. And I thank you for sharing your opinion and your thoughts with us. And thank you for being involved in the community, because yeah, that's really where stuff gets done. And that's honestly, I started out as a volunteer with things. So thank you for that.
I'll be buying the entire board a copy of Finding Kindness that I've read on Thursday, because I think we all need it right now. All of us, all 5 of us. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Wait.
I have a wait
Because you need to.
for,
You need a motion to go into executive session to discuss discuss litigation with Ballston 2.
and yes,
And to discuss collective bargaining.
I will make that motion.
trustee Fandesa,
Second.
trustee Raymond, roll call.
Trustee Fandesa? Yes. Trustee Raymond?
Yes.
Trustee Foremost? Yes. Trustee Baskin? Yes. Mayor Lamont?
No.
It starts with an R.
RO.
Are you going upstairs? I think we can stay right here. You know, shut Zoom off.
You and
You can mute and turn camera off.
You.
You can also stop it. People good, let free. Just stop it. Yeah, and then it's you know how to use Zoom.
Will it allow them to use the same channel?